This is everything you could possibly need to know before the Backrooms movie. All of our theories, all of our analysis, everything we've gotten right and wrong, and even more. Hello Internet! Welcome to Film Theory, the show that found a neat little portal under our office. You know where it leads? To the subscription feed, so go click on it, why don't you? At this point, the Backrooms needs a little introduction. This internet meme turned YouTube web series by artist Kane Parsons turned big budget feature film directed by Kane himself is one of the coolest success stories here on YouTube. I am so proud to see what this series has become, and Kane has an incredibly bright future ahead of him. But since we've been covering the Backrooms for, oh my god, 4 years? We've said a lot about it. We've analyzed the heck out of these videos, gone frame by frame, gotten a lot of stuff right, and a few things wrong. And today, I wanted to compile everything into one easy place so you can throw this on in the background to catch up for the movie before it hits this weekend. Don't you worry, we'll be making a new theory about the movie as soon as we're able, which you can check out here, or ad-free on Theoryverse, our brand new fan society with exclusive shows and episodes, all for the price of a cup of coffee. Go to theoryverse.tv if you want to check that out, but for now, well, put on your hazmat suits and prepare to run from the bacteria monsters, loyal theorists. Here's everything you could possibly need to know about the Backrooms.
For all of you who are uninitiated, the monotone misery that is the Backrooms began back in 2019, when this image was posted to a 4chan board dedicated to unsettling images. Just an ugly series of rooms, right? No big deal. Well, it came packaged with the following text, quote, "If you're not careful and you no-clip out of reality in the wrong areas, you'll end up in the Backrooms, where it's nothing but the stink of old, moist carpet, the madness of mono yellow, the endless background noise of fluorescent lights at maximum hum buzz, and approximately 600 million square miles of randomly segmented empty rooms to be trapped in. God save you if you hear something wandering around nearby, because it sure heard you." This post immediately got under people's skin. That endless series of mild annoyances that make you feel squicky and uncomfortable. Slightly wet socks, a faint electric buzz, harsh lighting, ugly wallpaper. In short, it is mundane horror, an oppressive monotony that slowly wears you down, mentally and physically. That miserable setting inspired lots of online artists to write their own independent creepypastas, even creating a short video game where you explore the space. But here in 2022, the Backrooms has suddenly exploded in popularity thanks to a new series by VFX artist Kane Pixels, who's taken the basic concept and started to build a full-on world around it. And you know what that means? Lore! Kane's first Backrooms short film takes place in, well, already we hit a bit of a snag. The slate says July 4th, 1990 something, but the description of the video actually has September 23rd, 1996. Anyway, this is probably just because it was the first video in the series. Dates become much clearer as the world gets more and more developed. Things start off instantly when a cameraman, fittingly enough named Kane, tries to set up a wide shot and immediately falls through the ground. Literally no clipping through reality, only to wind up in the dank and deserted world full of humming fluorescent lights, retro carpeting, yellow walls, endless corridors, and monsters that, at least at first glance, remind me of walking tripods. Our cameraman wanders around trying to find an escape. Along the way, he finds some interesting landmarks hidden amongst the endless walls, but ultimately he's caught and presumably killed by the weird fungi monster. It's short, it's simple, it's effective. Since the massive success of that first Backrooms video, Kane has been busy expanding the world with other shorts like The Third Test, First Contact, and Missing Persons, as well as making the accompanying Collateral.mov and March 11th, 1990 Archive.tar, which are both hidden in the descriptions of the various videos. From all of them, we ultimately learned that the Backrooms was an experiment designed by a company named Naessig to solve space issues, providing near limitless room for both storage and housing in an ever-shrinking world. Where it all went wrong, though, remains to be seen. But what I want to focus on today isn't the where and the why, but rather the how. How to survive. In the fourth video of the main series, we see that since accessing the Backrooms in 1989, missing persons reports have been skyrocketing, as more and more people fall out of reality never to return. So, if that were you, what do you do? How do you navigate a seemingly endless maze with limited resources long enough to potentially figure out this mysterious world? How do you avoid an unknown monster that roams the halls. What mistakes do we see Kane make in his exploration of the back rooms, and what could we do better? Pay attention, friends, because today I have the definitive list of 6 tactics that might just save your life the next time you no-clip out of reality into an ugly yellow nightmare. In Collateral.mov, we learned that in 1989, tests by the Naessig Foundation caused a massive earthquake that took place in the Santa Cruz Mountains. So, is the facility in the mountains? Are you at the top of a mountain and need to go down? Are you under the mountain and you need to go up? Are you in the upside down and you need to get upside downed? It's unclear at best. All we know is that in one moment we were filming with friends and in the next we're here. So once you land in the back rooms, the first thing that you need to do is take the advice of the US Forest Service, which suggests that when you get lost in the woods or a cave, you do not move at all unless you have a specific reason to take a step. Basically, you sit down, you don't panic, you assess the situation and the tools that you have at your disposal, and you stay where you are. You ended up at this location for a reason. Maybe this is an entry point for other people and someone else will no-clip in. Maybe people will wind up looking for you, and by moving, you throw off their tracking. In short, by panicking, running, and moving forward without a clear plan of attack, you are only succeeding in getting yourself more and more lost. Eventually, though, you will need to move, and this was Kane's first mistake. He had no plan. He just wandered aimlessly and headed towards whatever looked interesting. This meant that, when he started getting chased by the back rooms as monster, he had no idea of his surroundings and wound up meeting a dead end. Figuratively. Or, I guess it would be literal. Anyway, proper grammar aside, we're in a repetitive maze, we're looking for an exit, and we need a way to track our movements. And for that, we need to use a maze-solving algorithm, an automated strategic way for solving the maze with no prior knowledge of it. Our first strategy should be using the wall follower technique, also known as the right-hand rule. This is one that I think a lot of people have heard of, but maybe don't understand the actual mechanics of. Basically, it's a tried and true maze escaping method that involves running your right hand along a wall while you navigate the maze. You see, mazes, in their simplest terms, are just shapes that you're trapped inside. So you, as the maze solver, need to find the outermost wall and the hole that's presumably in it. Many mazes are what's known as simply connected, i.e. all the walls are connected together to the maze's outer boundary. As such, if you were to unwind the maze, it basically amounts to one big circle with an entrance hole and an exit hole. So by keeping your hand locked to one wall and following it all the way through, you follow the outline of that circular path and you either find the exit, congratulations, you survived, or you wind up looping back to where you first started. Well, that's certainly not ideal. It is helpful because it tells us that the maze isn't simply constructed, but rather it's what's known as a disjoint maze, one where the walls aren't always connected to the outer boundary. In the video First Contact, we actually get confirmation that this is what we're dealing with the back rooms. We see a map that confirms that the back rooms is a disjoint maze. Notice that there are multiple chunks of wall here that don't seem to connect to the outside line. But just because we're in a more complicated maze doesn't mean that we're out of options. First and foremost, if Kane was able to bring his camera with him into the back rooms, then his other belongings have no-clipped with him as well. Specifically, things on his body like keys and clothes. And this immediately puts us at a huge advantage. If you have something like keys or a belt, you should immediately mark your starting location on the wall, and then run those keys or belts or whatever against the wall to leave indentations or markings. You can scuff the walls with your shoes, you can peel the wallpaper, you can pull a Hansel and Gretel and rip pieces of your clothing off to use as breadcrumbs. You can write arrows and notes to yourself on the walls, which we know can be done since there are markings throughout the maze left by other people. This way, when our right-hand method results in us doubling back to where we began, we have a clear indication of which walls we've followed and which ones we didn't. And if the walls do happen to be somehow supernatural and can't be marked by you, then the ceiling tiles are another option here. You see, the ceilings of the back rooms appear to be a specific type known as a drop ceiling, or suspended ceiling, which is common in office environments where lightweight foam panels hang a few inches below the main structural ceiling, hiding things like wires and support beams. By throwing a shoe to break or knock down tiles, you're able to mark your progress in all the areas that you've been. Bit by bit, you eliminate the hallways that you've tracked and systematically work your way to the outer edges of the maze. One other strategy to help with this in a disjoint maze setup like the back rooms is the pledge algorithm. Here, you travel in a set direction. Let's say you walk forward until you hit an obstacle. From there, you put your right hand on the wall and you start walking around the obstacle, counting the angles that you're turning. Clockwise turns are positive, counterclockwise turns are negative. Once you start facing the original direction that you're meant to move again, and the sum of your turns is 0, you leave the obstacle and you continue moving in your original direction. This ultimately gets you off the disjoints faster, leading you to the outer wall of the maze and eventually to the exit. Right now, all you seasoned backroomers are probably laughing at me and saying, "Silly MatPat, the back rooms are an endless void of death and despair that'll cause you to slowly lose your mind." To which I say, joke's on you, I lost my mind years ago. I'm not gonna let a funky smelling series of yellow rooms defeat me. Plus, I'm not convinced that this thing is actually infinite or unpredictable. Like I said, in this new Kane Pixels series, we see a map of the place. We also see async employees able to walk through the back rooms using a long red line, presumably as a way to lead them back to the entrance door. So all of that is just trying our best to find an exit, but there's still one more important variable here that we have to consider: the monster that's looking to rip our body in half to use as human nunchucks. And this is again where a systematic approach to the maze will be our first line of defense. The last thing that we want is to wind up in a dead end, and the best thing that we can do to avoid that is to use the confusing layout to our advantage. Ideally, we're able to lead this monster to a disjoint, a section of the maze that we already know loops back around on itself. This gives us two simultaneous benefits. First and most importantly, we don't get lost while still allowing us to use the narrow hallways and looping structure to escape the sight lines of the monster. Instead of taking a straight path where the creature can easily track and follow us, you instead make tight turns in an effort to make yourself disappear behind a series of walls as quickly as possible. This sequence of repeated doors that Kane is chased through provides an excellent example. By dodging and weaving instead of taking a straight path, he should be able to make himself disappear fairly quickly. The other benefit of using a big disjoint to escape this thing, though, is that we can then try to loop back around behind the monster to follow it. Obviously, your first priority is going to be avoiding this thing until you have a better sense of what it is and what it can do, but by leading it to a chunk of maze that you know will allow you to double back around it, you'll be able to sneakily gather information much more quickly. And who knows, these things presumably know the layout of the maze, so by following them, they may be able to provide another resource for finding the way out. I suppose you could try to fight it, or try to trap it with a rope, or drag it into a null zone, which you wouldn't even know about. But honestly, is confronting this thing actually going to help you survive? Probably not. Focus on escape and defense as your first priority. Once all that's settled, you've created a system that actually works, you've learned that the walls don't magically change every 30 minutes, start grabbing whatever you can find. In the Backrooms video, Kane blatantly ignores a lot of potentially useful supplies. For instance, that ladder right there that's used to get into the crawl space, grab it and carry it around. Even better, try to use it to get into the ceiling grid. Remember what I said about suspended ceilings? That it hangs below what the real top of the room is? Well, often, walls only go as high as the dropped ceiling height. As such, once you're in the ceiling, you're not only hidden from the ground-based monsters, but you also have a wide open path to the outer edge of the maze unobstructed by any walls. Heck, you might even be able to find some electrical wires from the fluorescent lights that you can then follow, which again, should presumably be leading you out of the facility. Also, if you come across some rope in a dumpster, you don't walk past it. You check out what's inside the dumpster and you take the rope. You take what the world gives you because you might not ever come across it again. The same goes for any chair legs that could be used for self-defense, or heck, something inside of the filing cabinets that you walk past. Remember, you are stuck in a maze. Everything can have multiple uses. For instance, when Kane's walking up the fire escape, his camera catches a glimpse of a hole in the ceiling that's created by an air duct. Air ducts, as you can probably guess, tend to lead to the outside of buildings. So again, having that ladder or rope might have helped him to investigate that. When he comes across a cavernous section of the backrooms, those same items could have helped him get across the chasm to the other side. If he had a ladder, he could have dropped down into the apartment area that we see here, allowing him to more efficiently look for food and water. Sure, nothing might come of any of these options, but again, it's more likely to work than just wandering around aimlessly surrounded by repetitive yellow wallpaper. Last, but certainly not least, don't take any one-way exits unless you absolutely have to. While running away from the monster, Kane ends up sprinting deep into the catacombs only to find a hole that he jumps down into. It was the right decision in the moment because he was being chased, but had he just found the hole, this would have left him vulnerable, because it's a decision that he can't easily reverse. Again, document on the walls with your keys or whatever that the hole is this way, but only come back to it if nothing else seems to be working. Again, the last thing you want to do is to corner yourself. So there you have it, friends. How to survive the backrooms in 6 easy steps. 1. Have a maze-solving strategy. 2. Mark your path using whatever's on you. 3. Equip yourself with anything and everything that you can find. 4. Ceilings, wires, and air ducts are going to be your friend. 5. Never take a one-way path. Always have at least 2 ways out. And 6. If you absolutely have to, use the disjointed, confusing layout defensively when being attacked. Using all of those tactics, you have the best chance possible of escaping this nightmare scenario. And hey, look on the bright side. If you ever get thirsty, you have as much moist carpet water to drink as you could possibly want. Tonight, we're no-clipping once more into the Backrooms, the analog horror series right here on YouTube, produced by Kane Pixels. Last time we wandered through these jaundiced hallways, we were looking for a means of escape, a way to survive the endless maze of humming fluorescents and soggy carpets. But today, we're looking for something different. We're looking for lore! Specifically, we want answers. At this point, Kane's series is 3 months old, and in that amount of time, he's given us 10 videos full of creepy mysteries for us to chew on. What are the Backrooms, really? Did humanity create them? Have they just been a parallel dimension all along? And what about the dead man that we find hidden in the middle of the maze covered in a violent explosion of black? Who is this guy? What is this guy? And most importantly of all, should we be concerned about that monster roaming the halls? Probably, right? Usually a giant roaring threat is something to be concerned about. So throw on your hazmat suits, friends, and grab your tow lines. Today, we're going in deep. First, let's talk about timeline, shall we? Part of what makes the lore of the Backrooms so hard to crack in an initial watch is that it follows the tried and true formula of series like The Walton Files, Mandela Catalog, and FNAF, where the story is just told out of order. The very first upload of the series, Backrooms Found Footage, actually comes last in the timeline currently, September 23rd, 1996. So, through the power of reorganization, let's recap what we know in the order that we know it. Our story begins in 1982 with Naessig, a corporation conducting scientific research into magnetism and or electromagnetic field generators under government contract during the Cold War. In our first video of the series, Prototype, a video that, no joke, released as I was writing this paragraph, so forgive me if I miss anything in it, we get our first event of the series. A metallic marble is surrounded by what appears to be electromagnetic field generating tubes. Notice how the shape and general design matches diagrams for similar real-life generators. The system fires up, and just like that, the ball is gone, presumably teleported to some space within space, thereby making the ball a subspace emissary, if you will. I hate myself for that joke, but then again, you don't pass up the opportunity to make the very rare subspace emissary joke. Anyway, by July of 1988, Naessig, emboldened by that initial success, has given their distortion field experiments a room-sized glow-up called Project KV-31. According to the video The Third Test, the goal of these experiments was to solve, quote, all future storage and housing needs. So it seems like the foundation of our story here is that science discovers an entire other universe of endless space, and our first thought was, hey, it's a good place to store our junk. In total, Naessig conducts 5 failed tests to try and open a portal to this subspace before the 6th finally proves successful. On October 17th, 1989 at 5:04 p.m. Pacific, with the generator beefed up and something redacted being introduced into something else redacted, the threshold gets cranked up and blasts out a light show that seems to almost shake the facility apart. When the smoke clears, the Backrooms themselves have finally appeared on the other end. Naessig has achieved first contact. Unfortunately, that's not the only thing that happened. That date and time, 5:04 p.m. on October 17th, 1989, also happened to be in reality the moment a magnitude 6.9 lol hit the central coast of California, killing 63 and injuring thousands more. The timing here is clearly not meant to be a coincidence, as a secret unlisted video on Kane Pixel's channel gives us real archival news footage from the Loma Prieta quake, including a map highlighting the location of the earthquake's epicenter, the Santa Cruz Mountains. In short, we now know where our Naessig test facility is hidden. It's here, the epicenter of that devastating quake. And from that point forward, the world appears to be glitched. We see in the video Missing Persons that from October 1989 onward, huge numbers of ordinary people just start to go missing as they no-clip through reality, falling into this newly opened Backrooms metaspace. All the while, Naessig is slowly exploring this new environment. On February 3rd, 1990, they have their first major discovery, a mysterious dead body coated in what appears to be some type of black mold or aged blood splatter. So far in the series, he remains as an unidentified John Doe, but my suspicion is that this is actually Nicholas Bolton, a missing person that we see at the top of the upload. Notice a few of the details here. First, he's not wearing a hazmat suit, which clearly tells us that this is not an Naessig employee. Instead, it's someone who no-clipped into the Backrooms. Second, compare their physical appearances. Notice the wider nose, tall forehead, the hoodie, just like we see on Nicholas's missing poster. Around this same time, we also see that Naessig's government contract appears to have been canceled. In the next video autopsy report, we get quick cuts of various images on a screen. One image here is the top line of a document with the words contract termination. Things aren't looking too great for Naessig, and they're about to get worse. Just shy of 1 month later, the 4th member of an Naessig exploration crew is lured away from the rest by mysterious voices in the walls and ceiling, only to see his team glitch out of space when he tries to rejoin them.
Guys, do you hear this? Hey guys, do you hear this? Hey! Guys? Trash.
Now lost, he wanders the hallways, stumbling across a bizarre theater with burned remains in the middle of the floor, as well as a smaller crawl space with non-carpeted floors, forest print wallpaper, and the facade of a house with farm equipment out front. As he continues his search, we see what looks to be an exit into an async control room, considering his keycard works on the door and his sounds of relief. But it winds up empty, and his presence triggers a red alert. End of upload. About a week later, on March 5th, Async rigs cameras to motion sensors to capture the action of what's going on in the back rooms while people aren't there. We see Async crew members constructing more walls. Yeah, cause that's what the back rooms needed. More rooms. Humanity, you dumb. Later that night at 3 a.m., the cameras capture a bizarre dark shape that seems to be moving along the walls or the ceiling. Looks like the back rooms monster's been watching some YouTube videos. Don't explore the back rooms at 3 a.m. Asterisk scary. Asterisk you will cry. Asterisk shooketh. Which then brings us all the way back to the first ever upload, Kane's original found footage video. In 1996, a young cinematographer named Kane no-clips through the ground, falling into the back rooms, where he encounters some kind of monster that attacks and presumably kills him, sending his camera falling through yet another clip and back out into reality. If you go frame by frame during this moment, you can actually see Kane's whole body here being attacked by the monster as the camera falls. It's a very cool little detail that I noticed. So anyway, that's the story that we've gotten thus far, but it leaves plenty of major questions for us to speculate about. What's the nature of the back rooms? What is the monster roaming the halls? Why are there voices and farmhouses hidden inside the walls? Well, let's start with the monster. Is it human? Doesn't appear to be. You can probably also eliminate animal and bird. An insect? Nah. Maybe some kind of robot? It looks a little bit like one if you squint, but then again, I've always got animatronics on the brain, so I'm a little bit biased. I've seen some people suggest that it could be a ghost or an energy monster. No, energy monster, not monster energy. Regardless, we can eliminate both options because it has a physical form. It is able to throw objects and grab Kane. No, I think the Backrooms has already told us what this thing is. It's a mutated bacteria. Now, I know, bacteria are supposed to be really small, literally microorganisms, whereas the Backrooms monster is anything but. However, one thing that bacteria love to do is form colonial organisms, animals that are actually groups of smaller animals all Voltron together. TLDR, I think that is what we're looking at here. A colonial organism composed of bacteria, possibly one that's been further mutated by exposure to human DNA, specifically a mutated strain of Hay bacillus. That may seem specific, but there's a definite reason for it. You see, after Async discovers the mysterious dead body, they conduct an autopsy report on it, confirming that it's been decayed at uneven rates due to having been overtaken by a mutated strain of bacteria.
It's like portions of the body stopped decaying and were sustained. I took a couple samples of some of the material here. It seems to be closer to a mutated strain of simple Hay bacillus. It should be completely benign, but really, I don't know what to make of this.
Well, don't worry, Doc, cause I do. You see, Hay bacillus, also known as Bacillus subtilis, is pretty darn common, living in places like the human and cow digestive systems. It's a rod-shaped bacteria that's generally pretty harmless, and science loves these little guys. It's used a lot in experiments because it's very easy to genetically modify. This is one of the all-purpose cultures you'll find in almost any lab using bacteria for research because it's durable, it's manipulable, and it adapts in a very elastic way. And because it's so strong and resilient, it's been used to test out extreme environments like outer space, which I call out because later in the video autopsy report, we see that quick montage of images I mentioned earlier, and it includes close-ups of bacteria cultures along with rocket and space imagery, all seeming to relate to this very idea. Oh yeah, and it's also been used by the military. Between 1950 and 1970, the US Army released aerosolized bacteria believed to be harmless over populated areas of the country without telling anyone, all to study what the impact might look like if an enemy ever tried something similar. Another test was conducted on the New York subway system in 1966, utilizing our little hay bacteria. They kind of just dumped it in through the sewer grates and people dusted it off their shoulders. Here's the thing, Army, when you're on a New York subway, the biggest biological threat isn't the sketchy bacteria powder that you're dumping on us, it's the guy open mouth hacking into my face during rush hour. Anyway, all this about durability and space and genetic mutation makes me think that our monster is a walking, roaring bacteria culture surviving in the back rooms and evolving by coming into contact with the humans that keep no clipping in. And And that's not just speculation either. Kane has seemed to confirm parts of this. Recently on his Ko-Fi account, which is basically like his Patreon, he dropped this picture of the monster explicitly labeled as bacteria. Something tells me you're gonna need some more than antibiotics to kill that bacterial infection. Now that is what I call biological warfare. So that's a little bit about the monster, but then what are the backrooms themselves? What exactly are they, and what's their nature telling us about the world this story is set in? Well, when talking about internet urban legends to base a video series around, the backrooms is still pretty new. The original meme dates to 2019. The lore and branching ARGs all come up later, and these videos have all gone up in the last few months. This is a brand new evolving concept, but the bigger idea that it's grounded in, that the world we know has secret hollow spaces behind the scenes that we aren't supposed to enter, that idea goes way back into ancient mythology and folklore, probably as old as the human psyche itself. The ancient Greeks believed that spirits of the dead and plenty of other things inhabited an entire underworld of caves and caverns. The 19th century French occultist Joseph Alexandre Saint-Yves Marquis de Lévendre, how's that for a name, advanced what he claimed was evidence of an inner world inside the earth itself called Agartha, that some people still think is a thing today. Even the idea of just ordinary maintenance tunnels and access shafts all over the world being connected to a more sinister purpose was part of the background mythology in Jordan Peele's horror movie Us. It's a very familiar looking wallpaper, but of them all, the Backrooms is probably most similar to the work of mid-20th century sci-fi horror creator Richard Matheson. He wrote the stories that inspired I Am Legend and The Incredible Shrinking Man, as well as many episodes of Star Trek and Twilight Zone, including the infamous Gremlin on the Wing episode with William Shatner. But perhaps most importantly for us today, he wrote Little Girl Lost, an episode of The Twilight Zone that was so iconic it would be parodied by The Simpsons years later in one of their Halloween episodes using really expensive for the time 3D animation.
It's like, did anyone see the movie Tron?
No. Yes. No.
In both versions of the story, a character accidentally finds themselves passing through an imperceptible rift between our dimension and another, unable to find their way out, getting lost in a vast, confusing, repetitive maze. Sound familiar? Really similar to the idea of falling into the backrooms. In fact, the only real difference between all these stories is the terminology involved. For the original Backrooms lore, they say that you've no-clipped through reality, a phrase borrowed from video games to describe when solid graphical elements pass through one another in a way that the program doesn't intend, resulting in a player character ending up in an empty space outside of the quote-unquote level box. This sometimes allows you to skip around and cheat, especially when you're talking about older games when developers were still figuring out how to make 3D work. Now, Kane Pixels' Backrooms has yet to make any explicit reference to this. We have never heard the phrase no clipping, and we have not once seen any references to video games or digital worlds. In fact, Kane's series has taken the general concept of the Backrooms and layering on a science fiction rationale to ground it in a very believable reality. And yet, the video game stuff, I think this is exactly what he's building towards. And the key is right here at 5:45 in the very first upload. Check out the rope. It's sitting there, just sitting right there. At first, I thought nothing of it. It's just garbage on the ground, whatever. But then, 1 month later, we get this at the midpoint of informational video. As the lost async employee explores the smaller crawl space with Forrest wallpaper, he stumbles across the facade of a farmhouse, and near it is this, an axe leaning against the wall. Again, a singular object just sitting there alone waiting to get picked up. So we're wandering through a maze made of geometric shapes and repeating textures, stalked by a monster, and random useful objects are just sitting there out in the open on the ground waiting to get picked up. No real context around them. It looks a lot to me like a video game, the kind of video game you might no-clip in or out of. To me, this whole area with the tree texture wallpaper, the facade of a house on the wall, the random old-time farm tools that just look slightly geometrically off, this looks like the exact way older 3D video games, I'm talking PlayStation 1 era, would use polygons and flat textures to try and render outdoors and nature settings within level box designs. They would paint the walls to look like trees. They would paper the sky blue with textures. They would stick a house facade onto a giant rectangle to surround the door that they want you to go into. Check out the wheelbarrows, specifically the shadows of the wheelbarrows. Notice how they don't really move or shift position as the bright flashlight beam moves? While this certainly could be just 3D animation issues, it also reflects how many early video video games couldn't or didn't use dynamic shaders. Shadows, if they existed at all, tended to be fixed and painted onto textures. This saved on processing power, but also gave objects a bit of a flat look. There's even a point where our async employee leans in close to the wheelbarrows where it looks like the wallpaper pixel smears into just color lines. Again, like you'd see in a video game with texture mapping on the fritz. So if the Backrooms is indeed the space you go to when you no-clip through the ground, like we see Kane do in episode 1, then we're looking at evidence that reality itself on our side of the threshold is also a simulation. It could very well be that this whole series is just a modern take on the Matrix, a simulation that no one realizes they're in. And when Async opens the door to the Backrooms, they're finding a storage area for the extra unused assets, the procedurally generated worlds, the levels that just haven't quite made the cut yet. As Kane explores the various levels in the series' first upload, we see office supplies and warehouses, but also residential style railings and exteriors of buildings that are clearly indoors, hardwood floors, repeating filing cabinets. It's a mishmash of random assets, like when you're exploring a library of 3D assets from something like a game engine. All of reality being a simulation would also explain the voices that lure the Async employee away in informational video. Listen to the sound. These aren't voices that are explicitly trying to lure him away. It's not sinister in any way, it's just general white noise of a busy office or a party, almost as though reality is breaking through. While he's wandering around in a simulation on a computer, an office party is going on one layer of reality up. But outside of the wall textures and random objects just sitting out in the open like a video game, there's one piece of evidence that really clinches it for me. Something that gets me to raise my eyebrow. Notice the date on this upload, February 29th, 1990. Here's the mind blow. That can't be correct. There is no such day in existence. February has 28 days, and 1990 was not a leap year.
Hey, you sussy baka.
To me, this wasn't a mistake. Kane already picked first contact to happen on a day when a major real-world earthquake occurred. The dates in this series matter. It tells me that we're existing in a reality different from our own. One where a February 29th, 1990 can exist. A simulated reality. And the Backrooms is the boundary between worlds, where the separation becomes just a little bit thinner, allowing things like office voices and, who knows, maybe even a virulent bacteria into the simulation. Am I right? Will Async be able to break through the boundary? I guess we'll just have to wait and see. Today, I once again find myself trapped in the endlessly soggy hallways of the Backrooms, the analog horror series produced by Kane Pixels and available right here on YouTube.com for the low price of free. The last time we enrobed ourselves in its putrid yellow wallpaper, we concluded that the world of the Backrooms seems to function a lot like a level map in a video game. You know how in a video game there's a set map that you're able to explore, and that there are walls or invisible boundaries that make sure that you stay within the acceptable area of play? Well, the way I see it, that's the real world here in Kane's series, the bounded area that humans are allowed to play in. However, video games also have tons of things that are hidden in spaces outside the boundaries of those levels. Unused ideas, spare assets, cut content. You want to know why FNAF Security Breach's file size was so huge when the thing first came out? Something like 80 gigs of content? Well, it was just piles and piles of cut stuff. Full floors of geometry that weren't accessible in the course of normal gameplay, but hadn't been removed from the game's files. And that, my theorists, are what I expect the Backrooms are. The cut content, the spare assets, the AI-generated worlds that didn't quite make the cut for reality. Last time, we proposed that somehow the company Async was able to use electromagnetism to tap into those parts of the map, the ones that exist outside the boundaries of reality, beyond the parts of the world that we're meant to see, giving us the various repetitive corridors of the Backrooms as we know them. Now, since the release of that last theory, Kane has come out with 3 new videos. The first is Pitfalls, where one of Async's researchers descends deeper than ever before in the Backrooms, only to discover an entire underground city. The next was Report, where we see the immediate aftermath of that incident and Async sealing the entrances to the Backrooms. And finally, there was Presentation, where we see how Async pitched this thing as the solution to an increasingly overpopulated world, but how they ultimately lost their government contracts when a researcher accidentally causes a lockdown of the facility. All 3 of these new videos are full of lore details, but to me, the biggest revelation to come out of these uploads is that the Backrooms aren't just responsible for warping physical reality, they're also warping time itself. Attention all you partygoers, I think I've cracked exactly how and why people are no-clipping into this place. But enough talking, friends, it's time to go get lost in these endless hallways of lore. Now, despite the video game concept of no-clipping being a key part of the original creepypasta pasta that this series is based on, Kane has yet to explicitly reference any video game terminology. However, after watching this new slate of videos, I'm more convinced than ever that we're still on the right track. For example, let's take a closer look at Pitfalls. In it, we follow researcher Marvin Lee as he falls to a deeper level of the facility, only to discover a full neighborhood underground. And I do mean full. Streetlights, houses, trees, all of it. Well, all of it except for people. There are no signs of life here. So either an entire empty town fell into the backrooms, or this is yet another example of an unused or incomplete level. And when we do get to enter one of the houses, things are just slightly off inside. There are 6 inverted street signs just hanging out in the middle of an empty room, almost like a level designer intended to put them out on the street, but instead just moved them out of sight into the house. Making things even stranger though, the house has a single hallway leading straight back. It's like the uncanny valley of architecture. It's clearly meant to be a house, but it just doesn't nail it. Almost like it'd been designed not by a human, but rather by an AI. Something that's trying to mimic a human home, but without fully understanding the flow and function of the various rooms and hallways. But of course, it doesn't end there. If you've followed the Backrooms at all, you know that Kane likes to hide a bunch of secrets in the descriptions of his videos, and 2 of the new uploads, Report and Presentation, link to secret unlisted uploads. The first of these is titled This. I'm just gonna call it Numbers, because saying a long string of random digits every time is gonna be a pain. This Numbers video seems to be footage from a traffic camera on a highway. Nothing too out of the ordinary, right? But then, about 22 seconds in, we see a car no-clip through the ground. Not only does this tell us that literally anything can wind up in the backrooms, including large vehicles like cars, but I think we might be able to figure out who was actually in that car. Back in the upload Missing Persons, we see posters for multiple people who have disappeared since the opening of the backrooms. One such poster is for Margaret Watson, the only poster of the bunch that describes not only her physical appearance, but also her car. Her car is a 1987 Ford Escort, and wouldn't you know it, but when you compare the footage from Numbers to an 87 Ford Escort, they have the same boxy appearance. So I wouldn't be surprised if this is meant to be footage of Margaret Watson no-clipping into the backrooms on December 2nd, 1989, along with her car. But that's not all that we can get out of the secret upload. The digits in the title of Numbers obviously aren't meant to be random here, but what are they? All our usual suspects are out. Ciphers don't seem to work, it's not a phone number, and it doesn't seem to be long enough for hex code either. Nope, Kane decided to get even more creative with this one. That series of 13 numbers is actually an international standard book number, an ISBN. These are unique numeric codes used to identify books, kind of like a fingerprint for a book, and 978-0415-263-573 is linked to a book written by Charlotte Perkins Gilman, the literary classic, The Yellow Wallpaper. Yellow wallpaper, you say? If you've never had to read this for school, or even if you did have to read it for school and you didn't, this was a landmark piece of feminist literature about a woman slowly going insane after being forced to stay in a room with ugly yellow wallpaper. She begins to see moving shapes and people within the wallpaper, and she believes that the ugly yellow color stains everything that it touches. By the end, the woman has peeled all the wallpaper off the walls trying to help the person that's trapped inside, only for the woman to then believe that she's become that person. Now, there's little direct correlation between the short story and the Backrooms videos, but a lot of its ideas are clearly present here. For example, as we see in Pitfalls, the bacteria monsters can mimic the voices of their victims.
Hey! Can you hear me?
The monster can also infect the corpses after killing them, like we see with a victim named Nicholas Bolton in the video Autopsy Report. In a way, they're almost replacing their victims. The monsters are trapped in the backrooms, like the people in the wallpaper from our short story. Their next step then should be trying to get out of the wallpaper, out of the backrooms, and out into the real world where they can infect more. Framing this in our simulation theory, it's almost like this is a computer virus infecting reality, corrupting it, just like the ugly yellow color of the wallpaper staining everything that it touches in the short story. Now, while all of that's certainly interesting, and I always love a good excuse to work in a literary reference, it's the second secret video that really starts to break this thing wide open, and it all boils down to The Simpsons. This one is simply called The Simpsons, and it, fittingly enough, features a clip from The Simpsons, specifically the episode Bart Gets Hit by a Car.
I'd like to talk to you about bringing legal action against the fiend who did this to your boy.
Feels super random, right? I'm just sitting here watching a Simpsons episode now. However, the clip glitches out about 35 seconds in, and suddenly we're sitting here watching a Spanish commercial for a cough medication named Dimacol. And while I could certainly stand here and draw parallels between a medicine for cough syrup and a mutated bacteria monster running around, I don't think it's the content of these clips that's important here. Instead, I suspect it's the timeline of their release. You see, Bart Gets Hit by a Car premiered in 1991. This timing makes a lot of sense. Up to this point, practically all the videos of Kane's Backroom series have been dated from the late 80s or early 90s. But the Dimacol commercial really stands out in this context. According to its archive on YouTube, this thing didn't hit airwaves until about 2000. What I suspect is that async opening portals to the Backrooms temporarily messes with the flow of time. Here, that Simpsons clip from the early 90s is interrupted by a commercial from the future, only for things to return to normal after Async's experiment is done. Does it sound crazy? Yeah, it does, but it shouldn't. Time clearly works differently in the Backrooms, and this isn't the only example we have. Here in the Pitfalls video, as Marvin moves further into the hallway in the back of that weird house, the camera glitches just a bit, and if you listen closely, you can hear something playing in the background.
Repeat, Marvin, do you copy?
Did you hear it? It's really hard to make out, but if you listen carefully, it's actually a news broadcast from when Cuba and the United States reopened diplomatic relations. Let's compare.
Will make the trip to the U.S. Do you think that your current president, President Castro, will come visit the United States?
Repeat, Marvin, do you copy?
That specific broadcast, it didn't happen until July of 2015. The date of Pitfalls, meanwhile, is 1990. In this short scene, we're actually hearing news from 25 years in the future. But it doesn't just stop at news broadcasts or commercials airing decades out of their own time. We see the physical interference of time as well. As I mentioned earlier, the video presentation shows us Async losing their government contract with the Department of Energy because of an emergency lockdown. The thing that causes the lockdown? An Async researcher accidentally enters the control center for the Backrooms. Not all that big of a deal, right? Wrong. You see, it's the same researcher that saw his team glitch out and disappear all the way back in informational video. At the end of that upload, we see him open the Async control room and set off the red alert. But here's the thing. This guy disappeared on February 29th, 1990. His reappearance and presentation is on May 8th, 1990, over 2 months later. But clearly he hasn't been wandering around for that long. He's somehow been transported into the future. This can even go so far as to explain a discrepancy that I've called out in past videos. In the very first upload of the series, we see a clapper board that clearly marks the date as July 1990 something. But the date in the description of found footage reads as September 23rd, 1996, a date that's just completely different from what we saw written on that clapper board. When we first covered the Backrooms, I figured this was just an innocent mistake. You know, small error in dates during a point in the series when dates didn't matter all that much. But now it is clearly setting up the idea that time works differently within the Backrooms. But that then begs the question, how? Why is time acting crazy, and more importantly, why now? Well, we might actually have an answer for that. You see, one of the secret uploads for the series is an archive file from March 11th, 1990. In it, we see the rooms being flooded, which would obviously explain the soggy floors. But more importantly, this is where we first learn about the concept of null zones. Now, if you don't know what these are, yeah, you probably shouldn't. They haven't been explained at all, and they've only been referenced once in the main series as a passing comment in Pitfalls.
But what if Miller's right about the null zone?
In the original Creepypasta's lore, there were things called null rooms, but Kane's interpretation of the entire Backrooms idea has taken a lot of liberties, and his null zones don't seem to relate all that much to null rooms in any way outside of just sharing the word null. Instead, basically all we have to go off of is this one image. It's a bit difficult to make out due to the quality of the video, but I think it reads, due to the elevation discrepancy between panel 225 and 224, a null KX field is created. It's not much to go off of, but at least it's something. And looking back at Pitfalls, things start to make a bit more sense. Marvin asks about the null zones after entering an area that's at a slightly offset elevation. Look at the difference in heights between the hallway and the neighborhood. And that news broadcast from the future, the camera picks it up only as Marvin crosses the threshold of a single stair in the hallway. Each time we see an elevation discrepancy, he is crossing a null zone. See, the phrase null KX field caught my eye for a lot of reasons. backrooms. Seemed like a jumping off point that Kane put in so theorists like us could discover something about the world that he's building. So let's break down what the phrase could actually mean bit by bit, starting with null. In physics, a null is a point where two opposing quantities cancel each other out. Basically, when two equal waves meet, there's going to be a point where they perfectly reflect each other, thereby canceling each other out. The channel Electro Boom here on YouTube demonstrates this really well using sound waves.
Right now only the first speaker is on, and I'm gonna stay out of its way and turn the second speaker on. Now I turn the speaker off again. On. Off. On.
So whatever a null KX field is, it's canceling something out, some sort of a wave. And I have a strong suspicion as to what those waves might be: electromagnetic waves. We see what appear to be electromagnetic tubes making a ball disappear in the video prototype, and we hear talk about magnetic field distortions in other uploads like Third Test. So it seems like a solid hypothesis. Moving on to the KX here, we can assume that the X is a reference to the X-axis. You know, X, Y, and Z axes on a three-dimensional graph? Well, that explains our X, which leaves us with K as some sort of a constant. I dug around for formulas that use the specific KX nomenclature, and while Hooke's law for the potential energy of a spring was certainly a possibility, felt like an odd fit considering the material we're working with here. It seemed far more likely that the KX here was a reference to the numerous formulas for electromagnetic field equations that use KX as a dimensional point. And here's the thing, a lot of our everyday life can be traced back to electromagnetic waves. Light, heat, electricity, radio, X-rays, microwaves, all of them have a place on the electromagnetic spectrum, and objects that use or give off those things also tend to create their own EM waves. Your phone generates EM waves. Your car, EM thanks to its alternator. What's more, every person that we've seen no clip into or experience strangeness in the backrooms has been using technology that uses EM waves. Kane, Marvin, and the researcher from Informational Video were all using electronic cameras to write information onto magnetic tapes. And Margaret Wilson, she was driving her car when she no-clipped through. What if people are no-clipping into the backrooms because they're unlucky enough to be in a spot where the electromagnetic wave from the real world happens to meet one from the backrooms, thereby creating a null zone, canceling each other out, and letting the person slip through? Electromagnetism is also one of the four fundamental forces of nature that make up our world. If you think of it back in the terms of a simulated reality of a video game, it's almost like an integral part of the game engine code that runs our universe, and I think that's literally the case here within the universe of the backrooms. Through their experiments with electromagnetism, Async has glitched their own reality, like a speedrunner that intentionally manipulates the RAM of an old game to tweak the code and teleport to where they shouldn't be. But this has broken the rest of the game, the rest of reality, and now that part of the game engine is glitched. Players are randomly no-clipping into places they shouldn't be, or hearing audio from faraway futures as they wander into these null zones. More and more, the world of the backrooms is starting to sound like the world's jankiest MMORPG, and just like with a video game, exploiting a few glitches here and there can really cause the game's stability to collapse, which means it's likely that this is just the beginning. The physical world and time itself will become more and more unstable as new rooms are open and as more people clip in. What started as a high-tech way to expand your garage storage or squeeze in a few extra cubicles will suddenly put the entire world at risk. The lines between the real and the simulated will start to blur to the point that, just like with the woman in the yellow wallpaper, we're all infected. We're all going a little mad. We're all the ones trapped inside of the wall. Today we're doing something a little bit different. We're taking the script and throwing it out the window. You see, normally when we do a lore theory, they all build off the previous videos in the series like a wobbly Jenga stack. That way, bit by bit, piece by piece, we get closer to the truth. And if something's wrong, well, we go back and course correct before moving on from there. But what if someone else has it all figured out? What if we are so completely off base that that already wobbly stack of lore is also built on, like, I don't know, rubber band legs while an earthquake is going on? I am talking about bad theories, friends. I mean, it's not like we've ever had any of those before, but seriously, there's always more than one way to analyze a franchise, and Kane Pixels' Backrooms is the perfect example of this. Now, in case you don't know, The Backrooms is a massively popular analog horror web series found right here on YouTube, created by the visual effects artist Kane Pixels. It's all about a creepy alternate dimension of endless office hallways that people keep no-clipping into and then getting trapped in, as well as the scientific research company Async, who keeps trying to figure out what the Backrooms backrooms are all about. Right now, our working lore theory is that the world of the backrooms is actually one big simulation. Async's experiments have broken part of the game engine that's running said simulation, thereby allowing people to no-clip into areas with cut content or unused ideas. And because they've broken it, now everything is glitched, putting the world in danger. But you see, ours isn't the only popular theory that's been floating around for the series. In the fan community, there's been another very popular solution to what we see throughout these uploads. See, several popular fan theories have made a connection between Kane Pixels' backrooms and ancient Egyptian mythology. Yeah, you heard that one right. Ancient Egypt, complete with mummies and Anubis and the Field of Reeds. If that sounds wild to you, well, you're not alone. It did to me too. On a surface level, the yellow hallways of the backrooms don't really seem like they'd share all that much of anything in common with the shifting sands of ancient Egypt. And yet, there's a community of theorists out there who appear to have found a surprising number of parallels between the two. So that's why we're here, to review their evidence and go further, give more, and ultimately render a verdict. Are the backrooms secretly connected to ancient Egypt? Ladies and gentlemen, strap in. It's Morty time.
Leave your theories in the comments below. I'll pick my favorites in the next episode of Morty.
So the oldest example I could find of someone calling out the potential backrooms Egypt connection was this Reddit thread by Alex Miho Was Taken on March 23rd, 2022. Given the flurry of posts in the aftermath of Kane's first video though, I may have missed something earlier, so apologies if I did. Since that first post though, a ton of other theorists have flooded in to analyze the connections. The most in-depth example is this massive 6-page analysis from Zach Gardner on the entire backroom storyline. Now, this thread is long, so I'm just gonna touch on the highlights here. First, and most importantly, the name, KV-31. In the backrooms, KV-31 is the project designation that Async gives to their low proximity magnetic distortion system, aka their portal into the backrooms. At first, KV-31 might just seem like a couple of random letters and numbers that got slapped together, but it actually shares its name with a real-world location, a tomb in Egypt's Valley of the Kings, also named KV-31. Interesting. Let's dive deeper. Literally, the topmost shaft of this tomb was discovered all the way back in October of 1817, but the rest of the complex remained undiscovered until about 2010. Then, in January of that year, archaeologists discovered that the complex actually went much deeper than they first believed. Now, just on a surface level, that already seems somewhat similar to the backrooms, right? Our world exists on top of an undiscovered tomb, which remained undisturbed for thousands of years, exactly how the backrooms was underneath the real world until Async's discovery. Egyptologists were also shocked to discover that the KV-31 tomb kept going down deeper than they initially expected. There were hidden layers, new floors to unearth as you got deeper, exactly what we see Async uncovering in the backrooms. But the connections between the two go beyond merely the name and the general idea of secret tomb go down. As archaeologists worked their way through the KV-31 tomb, they discovered the remains of 5 mummies from Egypt's 18th dynasty. And now, look at the backrooms. How many missing persons posters are we shown? 5. And when we do happen to find one of those bodies buried in the backrooms, it appears dehydrated, dry and leathery, kinda like the remains of a mummified person in an ancient Egyptian tomb. And that's not all. The mummies that were found in KV-31 were so mangled that they were missing limbs and unidentifiable, just like the victims of the bacteria monster that we see in Kane's series. On another note, researchers of KV-31 installed a metal door over the shaft during the excavation to prevent any unwelcome intruders from entering the tomb. This is very similar to how we see Async erect a metal barrier between their control room and the back rooms, preventing people from getting in while also preventing any undead monsters from possibly getting out. Speaking of doors, by the way, other Reddit users have pointed out that the doors for Async's portal look awfully similar to the false doors that can be found in Egyptian tombs. These false doors are carvings or paintings that are meant to be artistic representations of a door that acted as a threshold between the worlds for the living and the dead. These were meant to be doors through which the spirits of the dead could pass from the earth to the afterlife. Given how deadly the backrooms have proven so far for anyone who no-clips in, let's just say demand would be high for anything helping guide dead spirits. In fact, the entire backrooms idea bears a striking resemblance to the Egyptian concept of the duat, or the Egyptian afterlife. According to Egyptologist John H. Taylor, the content for the duat drew directly from what Egyptians knew in their day-to-day life. Realistic features like rivers, fields, caverns, and islands, while also incorporating more fantastical imagery like lakes of fire, turquoise trees, and walls of iron. And while the backrooms Backrooms isn't drawing from natural features like rivers and caverns, it is drawing from everyday mundane things that we're all familiar with. Ugly wallpaper, fluorescent lights, wet carpeting. It also takes the normal and makes it abnormal, kind of like the field of reeds. And while no, we haven't yet seen anything as outright fantastical as a lake of fire, we have seen farmhouses hidden inside the walls, giant chairs, and homes full of backwards road signs. All things that we're used to seeing in our day-to-day lives, but combined with other ideas that they shouldn't be mixed with. Having laid out all the evidence, what do you think? Seriously, let me know down in the comments. I'd love to have your thoughts on this theory, because here's the way I see it. I'm not buying it. I love a good off-the-wall theory, and there have been plenty of times where I've been known to stretch real hard to get some evidence. But looking at the whole Egypt connection thing, what's here is circumstantial at best, and even worse, doesn't really add up to all that much. Let's start here with the biggie. The point to me that's the most compelling, the name, KV-31. Yes, the fact that the async project name and this tomb in Egypt line up is a fascinating coincidence, but we just don't have enough evidence to call it anything beyond that. First of all, KV-31 is an entirely unremarkable tomb. It's not very big like the seemingly endless backrooms, and it didn't contribute anything significant to Egyptian archaeology. But more importantly, there are hundreds of tombs all around Egypt. It's easy to hear a phrase like ancient Egyptian tomb and think something grand and mysterious like the pyramids, but in reality, they were just like fancy basements for burials. When I visited Egypt 10 years ago, I went to a few that were literally in the middle of some guy's backyard. No joke. We in the West have this mystique and allure attached to Egyptian tombs, but they're more common than the media would have you believe. Going back to KV-31, the KV stands for Valley of the Kings. It's on the west bank of the Nile, right across from Luxor. And in this one area alone, there are roughly 63 numbered tombs, KV-01 all the way through KV-63. If Kane had picked any KV number between 1 and 63, this exact same argument could have been made. It seems far more likely to me that Kane either came up with a cool sci-fi sounding collection of letters and numbers that just so happened to coincide with an obscure dig site in Egypt, or he knew about the numbering system in the Valley of the Kings, thought it sounded cool, and used it for Async's project name with little thought beyond that. Trust me guys, I get it. I've been there. I see a weird world building detail like that in a franchise that I love and want to theorize about, and so I try and reverse engineer it. I search KV-31 to see what comes up, and boom! First result, Egyptian tomb. From there, I would try to look for what else I could add to the theory, what other connections I could make that could be added to that stack of Jenga blocks. I get why people would want to go down this rabbit hole, cause I would do the exact same thing. So let's keep going to get a sense of how stable the rest of the evidence is. Let's look at the so-called connections between all the doors, shall we? The archaeologists in charge of excavating KV-31 sealed the tomb off using a metal door, just like Async seals off the entrance to the backrooms using a metal door. Sure, that's a connection of sorts, but probably doesn't mean all that much of anything. It's far more likely that the metal doors were chosen in both circumstances because they're common building materials that provide strong protection. That is just what happens when you're trying to build a secure door in modern times. And the idea that Async's portal looks like an Egyptian false door? I mean, they're both multi-tiered rectangular entranceways, but that's because they're doors. More importantly though, the theorists that are drawing the connection here overlook a major point, the false part of the Egyptian false door. They're fake, they were etchings used to simulate real doors. Kane's design for the backrooms door, meanwhile, appears to be entirely functional. There's the main entryway, and it's surrounded by cabinets that appear to have the necessary wires and electronics to make the main door function. This comparison also ignores that false door carvings were typically taller and thinner, while Kane's design is short and squat. As for the 5 mummies found within the KV-31 tomb compared to the 5 missing people that we see called out in Kane's series, that right there on the surface seems like it'd be a really solid piece of evidence, until of course you do the research for yourself. There aren't just 5 missing people that are called out in Kane's series, there's actually 6 posters with 6 different people shown in the video missing persons, as you can see right here. It's shown for a brief moment before the entire scene fades into this line graph. But what about all the bodies that were mangled down there in KV-31? Sadly, if you look into why they were so damaged, things fall apart even further. See, the tomb had been thoroughly robbed throughout its history, with damage attributed to both ancient robbers looking for valuables and more modern robbers stealing the body parts of mummies to sell to tourists. Humans are great. If KV-31 was really meant to connect to the backrooms, that would imply that other people had been exploring the hallways before Async opened the portal. This graph that we see here in missing persons explicitly makes it clear that cases for missing people skyrockets after Async makes contact with the backrooms. It's only after they break that seal that no clipping begins. And finally, we get to the quote-unquote evidence point about the backrooms taking modern, mundane places and twisting them into something uncanny, just like the Duat afterlife. afterlife. And to that I say, really? You think that's evidence? That is just storytelling technique 101. You know who else found everyday objects and then twisted them into something uncanny? The brave little toaster, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, Blue's Clues. And some tells me that I'm not getting away with a Backrooms is secretly the sequel to Blue's Clues theory. So what happened here? Why did so many theorists see Async's project designation KV-31 and work so hard to connect it to the KV-31 tomb? Well, I don't blame them for doing so. Like I've said throughout this theory, it's a fascinating coincidence, and this amazing community of theorists was doing their best to try and put the pieces together. Just to prove my point here, before deciding whether or not I thought the connections between Egypt and the Backrooms was even intentional, I did a ton of additional research to see if I could find anything else that might strengthen this entire theory. Dots that no one else had connected yet. And if I looked hard enough, yeah, the dots were there, but just like everything that we've already talked about, they were just stretched out of the bounds of reason. For example, one could say that the Backrooms wallpaper texture bears a passing resemblance to a pattern of reeds, potentially another connection to the duat. But that doesn't make a ton of sense because the field of reeds is the paradise afterlife for Egyptians, rather than the endless maze-like hell that is the Backrooms. See, when there's a mystery where something connects in an interesting or unusual way, humans like to seek answers. Our brains are hardwired to find explanations for the unexplained, even if there aren't any answers. This is a phenomenon called pareidolia. It means that people have a tendency to impose meaningful interpretations onto random data, finding patterns where there aren't any. Have you ever looked up at the clouds and seen a face or shape within them? Or seen those pictures of houses that look like people that occasionally go viral? That's possible because of pareidolia. Your brain is telling you that that cloud looks like a dog, or that house is giving you the creepy side eye, not because they actually are, but because it's human nature to see patterns within the noise. And that's what I think happened with KV-31 and this whole nothing burger of ancient Egyptian connection. A final example here, I thought that we might have been able to connect the bacteria monster to Egyptian tombs, specifically as some sort of manifestation of the curse of the pharaohs. This was an alleged curse cast upon anyone who broke into an Egyptian tomb. It became popular folklore after researchers mysteriously died in the aftermath of opening King Tut's tomb. Though there were many speculated causes, one of the most popular theories was that there was some sort of ancient bacteria or pathogen that was dormant in the tomb that was unleashed by opening it. The curse had a massive impact on popular culture at the time. It's also worth mentioning that more recently, a pool of black goo was discovered in a 3,000-year-old sarcophagus. I mean, really, there has to be a clear connection to the bacteria monster, right? But here's the thing, there's no evidence or scientific backing that the curse ever existed at all, let alone that it was caused by bacteria. Instead, all the deaths can be attributed to more natural causes, like blood poisoning from a mosquito bite. And that black goo in the sarcophagus? Apparently it was just a mixture of stuff used as an adhesive to keep the sarcophagus sealed, not anything harmful to humans. Gotta admit, I really tried to find a genuine connection here, because the idea that there was an additional layer to the Backrooms, that it was hiding some historical epic just beneath its surface of ugly yellow wallpaper, it's genuinely awesome, and Egypt is always cool to talk about. But everything the community pointed out can easily be dismissed or debunked, to the point that I just don't think that there's a whole lot there. The ancient Egyptian connections were interesting coincidences, but that's all they wound up being, loyal theorists. Coincidences. Today we're returning to the mono-yellow walls and ceaseless hum-buzzing fluorescence of the Backrooms. In case you need to catch up, the Backrooms is an analog horror series here on YouTube.com created by indie filmmaker Kane Pixels. The initial video Kane uploaded in January of 2022 absolutely exploded in popularity, gaining over 43 million views and becoming the 7th most watched video on YouTube of the entire year, all thanks to its unique atmosphere, clever scares, and fantastic production quality. It was also built for theorists like us, filled to the brim with awesome ideas and hidden lore for us to decode. In fact, towards the end of the year, Steph and I even gave Kane Pixels a Streamy Award to honor him for all his incredible work.
This is a box that was delivered to my house.
So, Kane Pixels, here. Did I just no-clip into the Backrooms? Kane, I went to the Backrooms, and I got you this.
I'm just so honored to be accepting this. So I guess really the only thing I can say right now is thank you.
But now, here we are, 1 year later from that initial upload, now with a story that spans 4 decades of time and 15 videos, plus a few secret videos mixed in. The community has come up with a ton of ideas to explain this thing. Everything from alternative realities colliding to the Backrooms being an incarnation of the ancient Egyptian afterlife. Our running theory here is that the world that we see in the Backrooms is some sort of simulation, like a giant video game or the Matrix. What we know of as the real world is the topmost layer of that simulation, but below the surface, there's an infinite procedurally generated world of unused and cut content. Stuff that either didn't fit or just wasn't good enough to make the cut for the real world. And while I still believe that to be the case, today I wanted to take a step back and reset. The Backrooms is a tricky series to talk about. Nothing is presented in chronological order, and things tend to jump back and forth in time, with some earlier videos referencing events from later videos that haven't technically happened yet. Heck, the very first video that Kane ever uploaded is currently one of the last ones in the timeline. So today, I wanted to do something a little different. I wanted to sit down and make a definitive timeline of exactly what's happened and when, so we can get ourselves a clear overview of everything that's going on in this giant mystery that Kane's crafting. And in doing this, in seeing what fits where, and more importantly, what doesn't fit where, we'll be able to learn a lot more about this story. Spoiler alert, friends, there appears to be a massive time loop we're dealing with, and we might just be witnessing the collapse of an entire universe. Jump into those hazmat suits and hold on to the red guideline, friends. We're going in. The very first event that we see in the series actually comes from the most recent upload as I'm writing this script, Overflow. This video takes place on August 7th, 1972, as we can see thanks to the signature of a man named Ivan Beck. Over the course of this 2-minute video, we also hear a radio broadcast about the Lend-Lease Agreement, which happened between the United States and USSR in, you guessed it, 1972. We watch as an electrical or radio station is overtaken by a green glow that shakes everything violently before suddenly cutting to black. Remember that green light? It's going to be important for us later. The video ends with the night sky now mirror reflected. Something in this universe has fundamentally changed. From there, we fast forward by about a decade to the early 1980s, when a Central California-based company called Async begins researching electromagnetism. On May 10th, 1982, we see one such test of a strange electromagnetic device in the video Prototype. Over the next several years, Async would refine this prototype into Project KV-31, otherwise known as the Low Proximity Magnetic Distortion System. On July 2nd, 1988, Async performs a failed third test of the system, but it's their sixth test that really matters. On October 17th, 1989 at 5:04 p.m. Pacific, they power up the system one more time and successfully open a portal to the Backrooms. They have made first contact. However, this move has dire consequences. 5:04 p.m. was the exact time of a real-world magnitude 6.9 earthquake that hit California, killing 63 and injuring thousands more. All of this is confirmed in archival footage found in the secret video collateral.mov. And that's not the worst of it. From that point forward, the world is just glitched. Small, unseen portals into and out of the backroom start popping up everywhere. People begin no-clipping through reality, never to be seen again. Starting in October of 1989, the number of missing persons reports skyrockets. This is confirmed in the video titled Missing Persons. Obvious video title is obvious. We soon learn that some of these portals are even big enough for entire cars to slip through, like we see in a secret, undated video that must come from around the same period. Meanwhile, back in the lab, Async begins to send in research teams. On February 3rd of 1990, they begin their first mission. Inside the Backrooms, this team of scientists discover the body of Nicholas Bolton, one of the people called out as having gone missing. Fun fact, the picture used for Bolton here is actually the senior photograph of Nathan Barnett, whom you might recognize as Dad from one of my other favorite creepy YouTube series that we've covered here on the channel several times. Go figure, it's almost like subscribing to this channel is a great way to learn about all the coolest series that you should be watching right now. Just a random thought that popped into my head, but you know, the subscribe button is down below this video in case you want to use it. Interestingly, Nicholas's body is covered in what appears to be some sort of black, moldy growth. 2 days later, on February 5th, in the video autopsy report, the medical report on Bolton's body shows that it contains a mutant strain of Hay bacillus bacteria, which is slowing decay of some parts of the body while completely overtaking others. The coroner questions Async about where they found this thing.
Mr. Beck, may I ask, where this subject came from?
Which Async must not have liked. During this video, a bunch of images flash across a CRT television, including one that states contract termination. Originally, I thought that this was a contract termination between Async and the US government, but I actually found a wider, clearer version of this exact image in a trailer that Kane uploaded back when the Backrooms was just a school project. And the version of that document reads employment contract termination. So I'm guessing that the doctor started asking too many questions and was let go as a result. Next up on our timeline is February 29th, 1990, and the upload informational video. Here we see Async send in another group of scientists. This is also the first appearance of actual named living characters. In the group, we have Marvin Lee and the camera operator Peter Tench. During their mission, Tench gets distracted by voices coming from an unseen party in a nearby hallway. He separates from the group briefly to investigate, but almost immediately he's met with a glitch that makes the rest of the team disappear.
Hey guys, can you hear this? Hey!
Without knowing it, Peter has jumped forward in time. We're gonna rejoin him in a minute. But back to the rest of the team. From Naessig's perspective, Peter's team didn't disappear, Peter did. He just vanished into thin air, and so the rest presumably returned to headquarters to report his disappearance. We see the fallout of Peter going missing less than a week later, March 5th, 1990, in the video Motion Detected. Freaked out by an employee disappearing with no explanation, Naessig creates a new enclosed control room just on the other side of the Backrooms portal. They also rig up motion sensing cameras near the entrance to track everything that's coming and going throughout the space. And it's a good thing they did too, because that night at 3:53 a.m., they capture the image of a dark, blobby shape moving across the ceiling. We don't know it yet at this point in the timeline, but later we're gonna learn that this is likely a black, gooey monster made of a mutant strain of bacteria, the very same bacteria that infected Nicholas Bolton. We know this because Kane has posted a picture of the creature on his Ko-Fi account labeled Bacteria. We are definitely gonna see more from that guy later in the timeline. A little over 2 months later, on May 6th, 1990, another group of explorers are sent into the Backrooms in the video Pitfalls. This team consists of an unnamed woman, 2 men named Mark and George, and Marvin Lee, now manning the camera. The party comes across a strange room with several holes in the floor and a door across the gap. One of the men carefully crosses the expanse, opens the door, and discovers a greenish glow. Instead of just saying what he sees, he calls over to Marvin to record it.
Marvin, get the camera over here.
Across?
Fine, just hurry.
But as Marvin tries to cross the room, he falls into one of the holes and to a lower level of the Backrooms. There, he discovers an underground neighborhood complete with trees and houses and streetlights. But things are just a little bit off here. Houses are built strangely. Signs are mirror reversed. Deep inside one of the houses, Marvin finds a room where someone's clearly been living, but whoever was there, they're gone now. When he hears a voice that's crying out, he goes to investigate, only to be met with another bacteria monster. This one chasing Marvin back to the hole that he fell into.
That is not a person!
Thankfully, Marvin's team's able to pull him back to safety and he escapes. The next video, Report, takes place immediately afterwards, with the team returning to Naessig's headquarters and sharing what Marvin found. This clearly concerns the Naessig staff, but because of the important upcoming presentation with the US government, they decide to just paper over the issue for the short term. A makeshift wall is constructed, sealing off the Pitfalls area for the time being as they further fortify their control room. 2 days later, on May 8th, 1990, we get the upload presentation, where Naessig hosts several government officials to pitch them A-Space, their vision for the Backrooms, an infinite storage and living solution. And they're just pitching to any old US government officials. Notice the DOE watermark. These are representatives from the Department of Energy, including this guy right here who looks a lot like James Watkins, the real-world Secretary of Energy from this time period. During a video glitch back in Pitfalls, we see reverse text that reads, "To deceive the Fede," which likely extrapolates out to deceive the federal government. I'm betting that this is text of some sort of internal memo at Naessig, worrying about deceiving the DOE during these negotiations. Regardless of any concern though, the presentation goes well. We see Naessig talking to the DOE about contracts afterwards, and one scientist confirms in a secret video that everything went according to plan.
Actually, that went perfectly. We've got all the initial signatures, and the contract should be executed by next week.
Except, there was something that didn't go quite according to plan that day. Remember Peter Tench, the Naessig researcher who glitched out and disappeared? Well, after witnessing his squad disappearing into thin air, Peter tried his best to get back to Naessig's headquarters without any sort of guideline. And he finds all sorts of weird stuff on his little adventure, including a section of wall removed to reveal a secret area with Forrest print wallpaper, farm equipment, and the facade of a house. Eventually, Peter's able to make his way back to the Backrooms exit, discovering the new control room that Naessig built after his disappearance. He's able to open it with his keycard, but it sets off a motion sensing alarm inside, at the exact same time that Naessig is in contract negotiations with the DOE. We straight up see Peter in the Naessig control room from a security camera's perspective in the background. Just so we're all clear about what's exactly happening here, this is over 2 months after Peter disappeared. When he glitched, he actually traveled forward in time. This really throws Naessig's leadership for a loop. In the hidden video recording 014, we hear a phone call between an Naessig researcher and his supervisor Ivan Beck, still on the same day, May 8th, 1990.
Wait, hold on. This isn't him, is it?
As this conversation continues, the image of a newspaper fades onto screen. When reversed, this headline clearly reads, "Fiery wreck beside Viney leaves one dead." Now, Viney is cut off and could refer to either a vineyard where they make wine or the town of Vineyard near Sacramento in Central California. Either way, we can gather from this headline and the tone of the conversation that Naessig believed Peter was dead, and that after he disappeared, they covered it up by staging a car accident so Peter's family wouldn't ask any questions. And when Peter realizes what's happened, that he's traveled into the future and and that his family thinks that he's dead, probably doesn't react all that well to it. There was likely some conflict with Async's higher-ups, which resulted in Peter either escaping the facility back into the back rooms, or Async just launched him back into the back rooms because he was a security risk. One way or another, Peter winds up trapped back in the back rooms, which leads us to the next video, Reunion. It's a few weeks later, May 25th, 1990. After Marvin's encounter with the bacteria monster, Async uses a remote control rover to return to the Pitfalls room and confirm that it's safe. They send more explorers and scientists in, creating a safe walkway to the door on the other side. Of course, we still don't get to see what's behind that door. Async instead decides to send the cameraman Marvin along with Mark and another researcher to explore the area around the Pitfalls room. Now knowing that there's a dangerous creature that roams through these halls, Mark is armed with a shotgun to protect the group.
Wouldn't want to be on the other end of that.
You wouldn't want to be on the other end of any gun, Marvin.
Yeah. That's probably true.
The trio head into a new area with no ceiling lights and floors made from white concrete epoxy instead of carpets. It's here that they discover evidence that someone's been living in this area. Tiles have been knocked off of the ceiling, seemingly as a trail to follow, and a map has been etched into one of the walls. However, before the group can really speculate about what's going on, they're ambushed by someone who grabs Mark's shotgun.
Peter?
Marv?
It's our old friend Peter Tench once again. He's been living back here since his escape or banishment from Async. Peter laments that Async basically took his life from him, asking if they held a funeral for him, if his family thinks that he's dead. The group confirms that yes, they did hold a funeral. Everyone thinks he's dead. Async is clearly keeping the fact that Peter Tench is alive secret from basically everyone. Despite being held at gunpoint, Mark calls for backup, only for Peter to shoot him and kill him as the video ends. At this point, we hit a pretty significant time jump, with the next video being a secret archive video compiled over a year later in June of 1991. Nothing really noteworthy happens in it, I'm just including it for completionist's sake. If we want something really interesting though, we jump forward again to found footage number 2, taking place on August 19th, 1995. That is over 4 years after the archive video and over 5 since the events of Reunion. In found footage number 2, a girl in a suburban home discovers a small portal into the back rooms hidden in her garage.
God, it went into the...
After experimenting with it for a bit, she's pulled in. Inside the back rooms, she finds strange giant furniture, a locked door that she can't open, and perhaps most strangely, a car crashed into a wall. This is clearly a car that no-clipped in from the real world. Now, I originally thought that this was the car that no-clipped off the freeway that we saw in a Secret Numbers video, but Kane confirms that it's actually a different vehicle. Given that Kane also confirmed that the Numbers car wasn't Margaret Watson's car like I previously thought, that means that at least 3 cars have no-clipped into the back rooms. If I had a nickel for every time that happened, I mean, I'd have 3 nickels. It's not a lot, but it is weird that it's happened at least 3 times. Anyway, the girl follows a trail of blood from the driver of the car into an area of the back rooms that looks more residential, but she doesn't find a body. Instead, she finds a room overtaken by black vines. These aren't just any old, creepy plants, it's the bacteria monster, who comes to life and starts chasing the girl. She runs back through everything that she's explored thus far, jumping down into a lower level that resembles indoor swimming pools. Eventually, she winds up at a dead end, but before the monster can get her, the room is engulfed in a strange green light that causes the camera to black out. All of this leads us back to the very first video that Kane uploaded in the series, found footage number 1. In this video, recovered by Async on September 23rd, 1996, we see an indie movie director named Kane filming with his friends before he trips and no-clips into the back rooms. After exploring around for a bit, finding weird architecture, items that are completely out of place, and markings left by previous people who no-clipped in, Kane encounters another bacteria monster. He runs away, chased by the creature before being cornered and presumably killed. As the monster takes him, his camera falls down a hole, no-clipping back out of the back rooms and into the real world. And while that's the end of the main uploads of the series, there is one final one that I should include in the timeline, the secret upload home27647.mov, which likely takes place during the early 2000s. This is just a home video with some glitchy sections and strange imagery, which I'm going to touch on in a moment. How do I know that it takes place in the aughts? Thanks to this frame right here. See that TV over on the right? This sort of flat-screen CRT television with the silver casing was popular back in the early to mid-2000s, meaning that at least part of the video was filmed around that time. So, stepping back and looking at everything laid out here, the main story follows Async's experiments, its employees, and its impact on the world. That much is obvious. But the more important story here seems to be the one that's hidden under the surface. Remember the green light that's popped up a few times over the series? It appears most prominently towards the end of the timeline in found footage number 2, but remember, it was also the first thing that we see in the series chronologically right now. In Overflow, a near identical looking green light fills whatever station we're in the early 70s. Considering that the building from Overflow shakes pretty darn violently, similar to what we see happening in Async's headquarters during First Contact, I believe that this was some sort of portal opening at least briefly into the Backrooms. And not just any type of portal either, a time portal. And given how similar it looks to what we see surrounding the girl in found footage number 2, I wouldn't be surprised if she or her camera were sent back in time to the early 70s. I know this sounds crazy, but we already are aware that time acts strangely in the Backrooms. One of the major events of the series is Peter slipping forward in time by several months, so we know that things can be physically transported in time in this universe. We also know that things from the future can intrude in the past. In previous theories, we've discussed how one of the secret videos showed us a cough medicine commercial from the early 2000s interrupting a Simpsons episode that aired in the early 90s.
That's the downside. Now here's the good part.
We can also hear a news broadcast from 2015 during the Pitfalls video, a video that happened 25 years before that broadcast ever aired.
Do you think that your current president, President Castro, will come visit the United States?
Taking that to its logical conclusion, something physically entering the Backrooms and then exiting at some point in the past is entirely possible. Additionally, remember the name on that document from Overflow? Ivan Beck. Kane zooms in real close to make sure that we remember that one real good. Ivan Beck. Now, why does that name sound so familiar?
I'm trying to get hold of my supervisor, Ivan Beck.
Mr. Beck, may I ask where this subject came from?
Yep, Ivan Beck is a high-ranking Async official. I think that this girl from Found Footage 2, or at the very least her camera, made it back to the 1970s and into the hands of Ivan Beck and an early Async. That could be the whole inciting incident of the series, creating some sort of time loop paradox. Async gets a hold of this footage of the Backrooms, which then makes them want to explore it. They open the gateway, which breaks reality, and eventually this girl no-clips in, winding up back in time, starting the loop over. This might even explain the name of the video, Overflow. Time is literally overflowing and running over the edge. What's more, during their exploration, Async may have just found themselves another time portal. The only other time that we see a greenish glow in the series is behind the door across the room in Pitfalls. And get a load of this. As Marvin is falling down the hole in that video, we see a camera glitch and text hidden within that reads, quote, "While data could be inferred from the readings, nobody knew what would actually be found on the other side." What if what they found was a portal to another time and place? That would certainly fit our description. Either way, whatever Async is doing, it is bad for the rest of us. One of the stranger moments of the series up until now has been this extended shot from the very beginning of Reunion, focusing on a coffee cup with the letters MLML and some coordinates on the front. Now at first I thought this might be some Roman numeral, but it's not actually a valid Roman numeral. You can't have MLM as a sequence in Roman numerals. So I opened up our trusty old Google Maps and typed in the coordinates, giving us the rough location of the real-world Moss Landing Marine Laboratories. So that solves the MLML mystery, and a bit more digging shows us that this logo is actually a riff on a real one that Moss Landing has used in the past. But the ocean messaging doesn't end with MLML. In fact, I believe that we can actually decode the biggest theme of the series based on a video just drowning in ocean metaphors. You may have noticed that I haven't mentioned one of the mainline videos of the Backrooms canon yet. I Remember. Well, that's largely because we don't know where this one slots into the timeline. There's no date associated with it, so there's really no place to put it. In fact, not really sure that the quote-unquote events that take place in this video are literal. The whole thing is just renderings of important places and people to the Async and Backrooms lore, angled and reflected like Inception or Doctor Strange, all as a voiceover narration reads a poetic passage. It's more of an artistic piece really, but it is considered part of the Backrooms canon. And here's the thing, the voiceover also has an ocean theme, just like that MLML reference. Just listen to what it says.
I had a home once, a manor overlooking the sea, but when skies turned dark, the house was taken by the sea, cast down to the seabed with all the other forgotten things.
All spoken as we see images of the ocean, but also really take in what this video's saying. The speaker had a home that sat beside the sea, but it collapsed into it and sank to the bottom, forgotten. This is clearly a metaphor. We're not talking about houses and oceans, we're talking about the world and the Backrooms and Async's experiments making the world more and more unstable. Remember when I called out the last shot of Overflow? After the green light flares up and something from the Backrooms is sent back in time to here, we see the sky reflected at the earliest possible point in our timeline without any other Async experiments that we know of. But afterwards, we get more and more of that reflected imagery in I Remember as Async continues their experiments. This is even reflected in another line from I Remember.
But I remember fleeting shells sinking ever slowly, folding downwards into themselves, forever tearing along the seams of the sky until nothing remains except the eternal ghost.
The reflections, those are the seams along the sky. The tears in reality as everything starts to fall apart. This might have even happened before, in a previous reality or simulation of our world. In found footage number 2, we see parts of a home inside the back rooms as the girl explores the area, including this part here with a strange banister and railway in front of an empty room. But here's the thing, this is almost identical to a room that we see in the secret Home 27647 video. Notice the unique bars on the railing, the way there's an open air entrance in the room behind it and a door off the right wall? This is the same architecture, but one is in the back rooms and one is in our real world. Want more proof? The girl takes a prolonged look at this painting before the bacteria monster wakes up and starts chasing her. And in the secret video, we again get a prolonged look at that very same painting in the home. And remember, based on the TV we see here, this video was likely taken in the 2000s, several years before Found Footage 2 takes place. So how could these details be in the back rooms now? Is it another time loop situation? Maybe. Or maybe it's because these are from previous iterations of our world, of the simulation that was destabilized and collapsed into the back rooms. In other words, the house that fell into the sea. There's a map shown in the Home 27647 video of the Ptolemaic system, a geocentric model of the universe that suggests that the Earth is the unmoving center of everything. And isn't it interesting that this very specific map that Kane chose to include in this video is very yellow? The last line, and I remember, is, "You have always been here." Everything revolves around the back rooms, whether it be in a time loop or a simulation or both. It's the center of everything in the world, and async's meddling has doomed the world to collapse into the back rooms once again, the house to fall back into the sea once again. You have always been here. In this series, in this world, the back rooms has always been a part of it. We're just the layer on top waiting to collapse down into it. And laying out the story Kane's trying to tell here doesn't feel like our world has that much time left. This creepypasta turned analog horror series created by indie filmmaker Kane Pixels absolutely took YouTube by storm last year. With its haunting aesthetics, its mysterious story, and its deep lore just begging to be uncovered. And that has actually become a big part of the franchise, something that Kane talked about in a recent interview with my friend Anthony Padilla.
You have people dissecting your videos. You have the film theorists. I think they made like 5 videos dissecting the backrooms. Does any of their analyses dictate where you take your series?
No.
Hear that, Matt Pat? You do not have any power over this man.
Oh, is that so? Then why did your characters follow my advice as I pointed out in a recent YouTube short? I'm not just coping here, am I?
Yeah. Thank you, Matthew, for all your coverage, but no, sadly, you do not influence the series.
Well, poop. But then again, I can't blame him. What Kane's been doing with the series so far has worked really well. Well enough that it's caught the attention of people well beyond our little corner of internet analog horror. Yeah, in case you didn't hear this one, Kane has actually teamed up with movie studio A24 to make a feature-length, big-budget adaptation of his Backroom series, with Kane himself directing. That right there, that is a big deal. A24 are the people behind instant classics like Everything Everywhere All at Once, Ex Machina, The Witch, Midsummer, Hereditary. My first thought after hearing this news, whoa! Congratulations to Kane. I am so excited to see how this thing turns out. My second thought after hearing the news though, are they allowed to do this? See, while Kane's series is really original in and of itself, it's based on a viral meme. Kane didn't come up with the original idea of the Backrooms, and he's openly admitted to that fact.
I was vaguely aware of the Backrooms. I was aware of it in terms of the original image and the caption that I saw on Instagram 2 years before.
So it got me to thinking, who actually owns the copyright to the Backrooms? See, this is an interesting question because we don't actually know who came up with the Backrooms. We know when and where it was invented, but not who made it. The idea originated in a thread on 4chan's paranormal-themed X image board on May 12th, 2019, asking users to post images that felt off in some way or another. One reply posted this picture of a large room with yellow wallpaper, which first appeared in another thread back in 2018. Someone else replied to this image, writing the caption that would then go on to set the tone for the entire idea of the Backrooms from that point forward. The stink of old moist carpet, the madness of mono yellow, the endless background noise of fluorescent lights. But here's the thing, by default, all of 4chan's posters are anonymous, so we have no idea who first posted the image and who first wrote the caption. So the whole idea kinda just transcended into internet creepypasta creepypasta folklore, where Kane eventually found it and then used it as an inspiration for his own series. Now, all of that in and of itself is really cool, and it's made for an incredible community-driven writing project as hundreds of people contribute to the lore of the Backrooms. But the introduction of a film into the mix by an actual Oscar-winning movie studio like A24, that right there, that changes things. Because the Backrooms is no longer the territory of the internet Wild West. It's now in a more traditional setting. And as Kane himself has pointed out, all of this unofficial, unlicensed content can start to become a problem.
In like a normal film setting, that would just be copyright infringement. That would be the theft of IP. But on the internet, everyone owns everything, even if legally they don't.
He's definitely not wrong, and this problem becomes a lot more tricky when you realize that Kane's series could qualify as the same sort of unofficial, unlicensed content. So today, I want to dive into this issue and see if we can work out what's what. If those original posts were in fact anonymous, who actually owns the Backrooms? Does anyone own the Backrooms? And is Kane's series and this big budget movie all at risk of copyright infringement? Is all of this the end of the Backrooms as we know it? Put on your hazmat suits, loyal theorists, because we're headed to the most terrifying and endless labyrinth of them all, copyright law. Before we get started, at this point I feel like it goes without saying, but just to be clear, I am not a lawyer. This is not legal advice. These are just the findings that I was able to dig up during my research. Also, we're only going to be talking about copyright law as it pertains to the US, not because other countries and their laws are unimportant, but more because the person Kane and the company A24 that we're talking about here are in the US. Cool? Cool. So I think the first question we need to answer here is, can an anonymous work be copyrighted? I mean, might be kind of hard to just stroll down to the US Copyright Office wearing a disguise and then filling out some forms without listing names, right? No, actually, you can absolutely file for copyright protection without filling in any sort of author's name. But even so, you wouldn't need to in the first place. You don't actually need to formally register a creative work with the government to get that copyright protection. You actually get that protection the moment that your work is created, whether or not you're known to be the creator of the work. The highest profile example of this in recent years has got to be the anonymous graffiti artist Banksy, who defended their artwork from being used by a greeting card company by using the copyright protection on said artwork. Now, to be fair, this case happened over in Europe, but this sort of anonymous copyright protection works exactly the same way in the US. We actually go into a lot of detail about copyrights, trademarks, and how films like Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey are Disney's worst nightmare in another video, but the long and short of it, under the Copyright Term Extension Act, for an anonymous work, anything created in the US has copyright protection for 95 years after it's first published, or 120 years after its first creation, whichever comes first. All of this together then should mean bad news for Kane and the Backrooms movie, right? Since the original 4chan post was published in 2019, the copyright for it shouldn't expire until 2114. So if that's the case, Kane might want to take down his videos for the next couple of decades, right? Well, maybe not. We've established that anonymous works are protected by copyright, but our next question here is whether or not this sort of 4chan post can even be copyrightable in the first place. Short answer, yes. Long answer, yeah. It's complicated. Copyright protects original works fixed in any tangible medium of expression. Basically, if you make something original and creative, you own the copyright for it. Book, movie, music, architecture, YouTube video, or my personal favorite, pantomime. Now, the bar for originality and creativity are pretty darn low in the eyes of the law, so the original picture from the Backrooms absolutely qualifies. Whoever took that picture of the room and posted it to 4chan created the image, so check there for originality. And they were exercising some level of creativity in the choice of the subject, how it was framed, the choice to do it at a Dutch angle, etc. Same thing for the separate person who wrote the caption. Obviously, it's original insofar as they came up with the ideas and they wrote them. And there's no denying that it's brimming with creativity, setting a bleak scene and creating a captivating horror scenario. It also passes the bar and gets copyright protection. However, even if the picture and the text are separately protected by copyright law, it's important to remember the scope of said protection. First of all, even if it's found that something is directly violating the copyright of the posts, it's gonna be difficult for the original authors to come forward with a case. The original 4chan posts have long since been deleted, along with any potentially identifying information like IP addresses, and these authors are going to have a difficult time proving that they were the ones who originally made the posts. Secondly, even if they could prove their ownership, it's probably not even worth the legal hassle. Though you don't lose copyright protection on your work if you don't enforce that protection, how vigorously you protect your work is factored into a court's judgment on the matter. For example, if you took a photograph and wrote a caption for it that was then widely circulated circulated across image boards, YouTube, Twitter, and dedicated fan wikis for years, and you never took any action until real money came along, yeah, the judge is gonna take that into consideration. Anything you might win in damages might not even be enough to cover the legal fees. Thirdly, sure, you can copyright individual works, but you can't copyright ideas. Just because someone takes a picture of a creepy room with fluorescent lights and yellow wallpaper doesn't mean that they're the only one with copyright to that aesthetic, and that no one can ever take another picture of a creepy room with fluorescent lights and yellow wallpaper. The copyright protection of this original Backrooms photograph is limited to this single photograph. So yeah, if Kane wants to use this exact specific image in his series or movie, sure, that might be a problem, but he clearly hasn't done that. He's created entirely new imagery for his videos. And as for the text, sure, these two sentences and the way that they express their ideas are protected by copyright, but the ideas themselves, they're not protected. Even something specific like the word backrooms, which Kane took from the post to use as the name of the series, wouldn't be protected here. Why? Well, you can't copyright names, titles, words, or short phrases. That kind of stuff falls under the domain of trademarks, another thing that we cover in more detail over in that Winnie the Pooh video. Additionally, the word and idea of a back room, you know, a room in the back of a business or office or whatever, has existed long before that 4chan post, so it's not exactly something you could just decide is yours because you took a picture or thought of a spooky story. Obviously, Kane lifted the general vibe of the back rooms from the original image and caption, the yellow wallpaper, fluorescent light, liminal spaces, all that jazz. He also took the general idea of the back rooms being huge and full of weird stuff. And again, just to clear up any ambiguity here, Kane admits that he was very much inspired by the post.
I was vaguely aware of the backrooms, or I was aware of it in terms of the original image and the caption that I saw on Instagram 2 years before.
Other than that though, not a whole lot here sticks. Plenty of ideas are reminiscent of content from the original Backrooms post or the Backrooms wiki. People in Kane's series fall into Backrooms in a way that seems visually similar to no clipping, but Kane has never once used the word no clipping to describe that process in his canon. Sometimes strange noises that sound like a party can be heard in Kane's videos, which could be a reference to the party goers from the wiki's canon. But again, Kane has never brought the actual partygoers or their lore into his world. Even ideas like the size of the backrooms in Kane's series aren't one-to-one with the original post. Sure, Kane's backrooms are big, but it's never once specifically mentioned to be 600 million square miles like the original post described it. Pretty much the only things that Kane took from that original post are the yellow vibe, the idea of falling into and getting lost, and the words, the backrooms. Most everything else in these videos are entirely original creations of Kane's. The organization Naessig and their goals, Project KV-31 and the portal into the backrooms, the bacteria monster.
Lifeform fellow.
Lifeform fellow.
Yeah, sorry guys, you gotta update the wiki.
Sorry, the Lifeform fellow? Sure. Well, anyway, that was still Kane's. The long and short of it is that he's more than in the clear to make a film about the original story that he's crafted. But see, Kane's not the person I'm worried about in this episode. After all of this research into copyright law, the quirks of anonymity, and who owns what in this circumstance, he's gonna be fine. He's well within his legal rights to partner with A24 and make this movie, and I'm excited to see what comes of it. No, I'm more worried about us. You, me, and all those small creators out there. What concerns me now is what this movie is gonna mean for the sorts of crowdsourced online horror stories that the Backrooms represents. I fear that this could spell disaster for these sorts of stories. Why? Well, because even if Kane and A24 are in the clear to make their Backrooms movie, they're likely gonna want to protect that film to the letter of the law. Now, don't misunderstand me. I don't think that Kane is gonna be going after people for making their own original Backrooms content. I don't think he wants to do that. He has been nothing but a kind and thoughtful guy every time that we've interacted. And even in that interview with Anthony, he explained his thoughts on the whole communal ownership of ideas thing.
On the internet, everyone owns everything. Even if legally they don't, it feels like you do. And in practice, you do. I don't have an issue with that. I like that. That's a good thing.
That right there, that is a great way to look at projects like the Backrooms. No, the problem here isn't gonna be coming from Kane, it's gonna be coming from the studios. See, making the jump from online video to major motion picture involves a lot of money. A lot of money. In budget, sure, but also in potential returns from movie ticket sales and merch.
Merchandising, where the real money from the movie is made.
If you go and look up the highest grossing media franchises of all time, you'll see that the lion's share of their revenue actually comes from the merch. It's true for Pokemon, Star Wars, Mickey Mouse, Winnie the Pooh, Minecraft, and if this Backrooms movie's a hit, I could absolutely see this sort of thing happening here too. Just imagine, Hazmat Guy action figures, Lifeform fellow plushies. Kane may or may not be interested in this part of the show business, but the Hollywood producers he's working with definitely are. And that means that they're gonna want to protect their IP vigorously so so they're the ones making that money. I mean, this exact scenario has happened before. Y'all remember Slender Man? He's a pillar of online creepypasta folklore, and just like the Backrooms, everyone felt like they owned a part of Slender Man. And at the beginning, things definitely operated that way. That's why you saw so many free, low-budget indie projects centered on the Slender Man, Slender the 8 Pages, Marble Hornets. But once the idea of Slender Man became a phenomenon and caught the attention of larger media companies, when real money started to get involved, things changed. Eric Knudsen, the original creator of Slender Man, had to step up to stop shady, low-quality content from destroying his idea. He became more involved in for-profit projects like Slender the Arrival, and eventually he sold the rights to the character entirely to Mythology Entertainment, who went on to block independent crowdfunded movies from release and then made their own big-budget film with Sony Pictures. Again, I cannot stress enough how much I don't think Kane wants this to happen, but when you're dealing with Hollywood, this sort of stuff becomes inevitable. What then do we do here, loyal theorists? If the Backrooms film is successful, I don't want there to be some sort of gold rush of all these major movie studios trying to take their claim on any and every viral creepypasta and internet folklore. Does anyone really want or need the EA-funded Jeff the Killer game, a Universal Studios Ben Drowned movie, a Lavender Town Netflix miniseries? I don't think so. Thankfully, there are ways to protect yourself, your work, and your favorite content creators using the exact same copyright laws that got us started down this road in the first place. First and foremost, if you create something and post it online, make sure you sign it. Make sure that it's attributed to you, either with your real name or an online alias that you can prove is yours. That way, people know that this was your work from the second that you uploaded it. It is unambiguously yours, and your creative rights are protected by copyright. I mean, that's why they're there after all, might as well put them to use. And on top of this, make sure that you're posting to platforms that respect those rights, and don't have anything shady hidden in their end user license agreements that somehow transfer any ownership of content posted there to their website. You'd actually be surprised how many fairly large websites have clauses like this, and that is really not cool. Next, if you can, create your own characters and use your own ideas. Obviously, those will always belong to you, and no one's gonna be able to use that content without your approval. That being said, it can be difficult, so third, if you do want to build off of something that already exists, make sure that what you're building off of is either in the public domain or it's basic enough that what you contribute will clearly be yours. What am I talking about? Well, some of it's obvious. If you want to write stories about ancient mythology, folklore, fairy tales, stuff like Thor or the Baba Yaga or the Little Mermaid, you are almost certainly in the clear, as long as what you write isn't taken from other modern interpretations of those same ideas. Other things that you should be good to use are urban legends and cryptids, stuff like Bigfoot, Mothman, Bloody Mary. No single person owns those ideas, and you could just make some incredibly unique stories using them as jumping off points. This also applies if you want to create something using basic ideas to build off of, like with the Backrooms. Take the same idea that Kane used as the basis for his series, and then build your own ideas on top of it, away from Kane's. You don't need to use Async or Project KV31 or the Lifeform Fellow to tell a compelling story about the Backrooms. All you gotta do is take an idea that you like and change it enough that it becomes your own thing. Great example of this, the Endermen from Minecraft. They were originally spoofs of Slender Man. I mean, the name alone makes it pretty darn obvious. But over the years, the Endermen have had their own quirks and lore added. They've become completely unique from their Slender origins. You can do the exact same thing, using ideas that you like and then changing them enough to make them yours and yours alone. So all of that protects you and your work, but what if we want to protect the collective works? Stuff like the incredible community-driven lore that's popped up around the Backrooms. Well, we have the perfect template to look to with the SCP Wiki. If you somehow don't know, the SCP Foundation is a collaborative writing project where users submit articles about fictional objects, locations, and characters, all inspired by elements of horror, sci-fi, and urban fantasy. A lot of this content is similar in tone to the Backrooms. Once an article is approved to go up on the website, though, anyone is free to take the ideas from that article and add it to their own work, both on and off the SCP website. Everything published on the SCP Wiki is done through the Creative Commons Attribution Share-alike 3.0 license, or CC BY-SA for short. That means that anyone is free to make content based on SCPs. They can even make money, but they have to credit the original authors, and then also publish their work under that same share-alike license. That means that yes, anyone from an indie game dev to a major movie studio can profit from the SCP Wiki and their articles, but the ideas that they add to the SCP must also be free for anyone else to use, publish, and profit from. Though this might not work for everything, this is an awesome system for these sorts of collaborative projects. And maybe the single most important thing to keep in mind about all of this, support the independent writers and artists that you love so they can keep creating. Read the work of these creators, share them with your friends, help spread the word. One of my particular favorites that I haven't seen reach the same level of success as the Backrooms or SCP yet are the short stories by the Reddit user Search and Rescue Woods. They have a series about these mysterious staircases just appearing out in the woods and their connections to missing persons. It is great. Remember, the next Backrooms, Slender Man, and SCP Foundation is out there somewhere, just waiting to be discovered.
Found footage horror mastermind Kane Pixels has returned to his Backroom series with a new video, and it's a doozy. Believe it or not, it's been over a year since Kane uploaded his last Backrooms video, but that doesn't mean a lot hasn't happened with the franchise. Obviously, Kane had to go off and make his feature film with A24, but the actual Backrooms have also been found, like the original image that started the whole viral internet trend. Yeah, some truly dedicated internet sleuths were able to track down the original image to the website of a hobby town under renovation in Wisconsin in 2003. I mean, come on, the Backrooms would be in Wisconsin. Apparently, the building also used to be a furniture store, so the fact that it felt so weird, disjointed, and unfinished, it's because it literally was all of those things. The internet truly amazes me sometimes. But with that particular real-world mystery solved, Kane saw fit to finally come back to YouTube to give us new mysteries in his fictional world, with a brand new 45-minute upload packed with more new ideas, new spooks, and of course, new lore. Let me tell you, people were hungry for a new video and have been picking this apart frame by frame. Like so many other online, animated, or analog horror series, there's an awesome community of theorists dedicated to Kane's Backroom series, which you can find over at the Kane Pixels Backroom subreddit and Kane's Facility Discord server if you want to get involved. And right now, it's our turn to jump back into it too. In case you don't know, our running theory here at Theorist is that the world of the Backrooms is sort of a simulation, like a video game or The Matrix. The real world is the topmost layer of this simulated reality, while the Backrooms is the layer beneath it, full of all the unfinished assets and procedurally generated levels that didn't end up getting used. And sometimes, people from the top layer of reality slip through or no-clip into the Backrooms, where they're more or less trapped forever. I still believe that this is the direction the series is headed, but this new video, Found Footage 3, it introduces so many new ideas that support our theory and should terrify Async and the people of the real world. You see, this is no longer just a series about people falling into the Backrooms, it's also one about the monsters of the Backrooms getting out into the real world. Yeah, put on your hazmat suits, chat, we have a lot to dig through here today. Found Footage 3 follows a man named Ravi as he hears strange noises coming from the downstairs of his house. As he investigates, he finds that a window has been broken and a massive hole has been punched into the wall of his basement. He cautiously enters it, but soon falls through the floor, no clipping into the Backrooms. Exploring the area, Ravi finds a strange, empty corporate area, incomplete homes with furnitures and stairways in odd places, a giant cityscape with skyscrapers that extend both up and down beyond what he can see, an industrial space with a lot of Chinese iconography, a makeshift radio tower, and a yellow office that looks oddly familiar. Fun fact, right here in the video, we see a recreation of the very first Backrooms image that went so viral. Notice the part of the wall at the bottom left part of the door? It's identical, so that's a fun little nod. Good job, Kane. Regardless, Ravi is chased by a mysterious new creature through these areas, a humanoid monster that sprints at him. He only barely escapes and eventually hides inside of a house where he can hear a man talking. He tries to speak to the man, and the man can hear him, and despite being in the same location, they can't see each other. The man tries to help Ravi, but fails, and, well, we're not exactly sure what happens.
Hello?
We hear a scream, a loud crash, and then nothing. Ravi then accepts that there is no escape. He sits down, crying, laughing, and giving a last monologue before he seemingly dies, though his fate is ultimately left ambiguous. And, more or less, that's the video. So first things first, it's worth noting what we don't see in this video. Namely, there's little sign of series mainstays like Async, the hazmat suits, or the traditional monochromatic yellow wallpaper. Now, partially, I'm sure that this is because Kane is expanding what his version of the Backrooms is and what it can be, but I also have to wonder if A24 reserved the rights to or control over that imagery for the movie. Just to be clear, that is total speculation on my part, but it did stick out to me. And it could partially be why Kane is exploring so many other ideas, like his version of the pool rooms in Found Footage 2 and all the various environments here in Found Footage 3. It's him taking some itty-bitty inspiration from the different levels of the facility from separate Backrooms wiki lore and putting his own unique spin on it. All that being said, said, there were a couple very subtle hints at what Async has been up to in the backrooms. First off, it's clear that they either found Ravi's body, or at least his camera, sometime after this video was filmed. See, this is the first of the 3 found footage videos where we don't actually know how the tape was, well, found. We see the camera from the first video no-clip back into the real world, where it was likely recovered by Async, and we believe that the second camera was sent back in time into the hands of Async bigwig Ivan Beck. But this one, well, it looks like Ravi dies in the backrooms. Clearly someone rescued this tape, and that someone was almost certainly Async, so don't be surprised if we see some yellow hazmat guys stumble upon Ravi's body in the Backrooms movie and pick up this camera. Secondly, we see Ravi walk by a door that looks a lot like one of the gateways that Async built to wall off parts of the Backrooms. And notice what's up against this door? It's a bunch of chairs piled up in what looks like sort of a barricade. Or perhaps as if they were thrown against the door, trying to break it down. We see here in Found Footage 3 that the monsters living in the Backrooms don't really understand how to use doors.
Hello?
And literally one of the first things we see the Lifeform fellow monster do in Kane's very first Backrooms video is throw a chair. I think all of these chairs were thrown at this door, with the bacteria monsters trying to get through and into Async's headquarters, but they just couldn't manage to do it. Now, with all of that laid out, the next thing we should try to do here is answer, where does Found Footage 3 take place in the Backrooms timeline? One of our last theories on the Backrooms was trying to put things together into a cohesive, definitive timeline of events, but we run into some problems with Found Footage 3. See, unlike Kane's other videos, he hasn't put a date into the description. Thankfully, there are a lot of context clues giving us dates, but the problem being that none of those dates line up with one another. For example, the quality of this footage lines up with something you'd expect to be shot on an old camcorder, very much in line with the other content of the series, implying that it takes place in the 1990s. This is further driven home when we hear Ravi talking about overhearing Monsanto executives admitting fault in a case involving a sick kid. Monsanto is a real-world agricultural and biotechnology company, and they were involved with several lawsuits and conspiracy theories during the 1990s, most of which involved chemicals and polluting local communities. And we can further narrow this down with the radio at the beginning of the video, which mentions the Oklahoma City bombing. This was an event that took place on April 19th, 1995, meaning that this was probably recorded around the same time. But, of course, there's a wrinkle. While walking through the facility, Ravi comes across this poster in Chinese. Using Google Lens, I was able to translate this and then reverse image search it, revealing that it was a real-world poster for an annual health screening in 2022 in Arcadia, California. There's even an official English version of this same poster, which you can see here. Obviously, that's much further on the timeline than the 1990s, and it's not even the only other time frame directly referenced here. Towards the end of the video, when Ravi first encounters the disembodied voice of the man inside of the home, we hear that there's a TV playing in the background. And if you listen very closely, you can hear a distinct ad playing. I don't know about you, but that soundbite was burned into my memory thanks to watching a copious amount of television in high school. And after a quick Google search of that exact quote, I found that this was actually part of an ad for freecreditreport.com that ran between 2007 and 2009.
I was getting depressed because of all the stress I was feeling at home.
Still a banger. Now, these are definitely the same clip. Listen to them back to back.
I was getting depressed because of all the stress I was feeling at home.
That's the same sound, and it tells us that this dad that Ravi's talking to exists in the late 2000s, over a decade away from either the 1990s where Ravi's from, or 2002 where the poster originated. Now, this is not the first occurrence where we've seen time acting funky in the Backrooms. The Async employee, Peter Tinch, was thrust forward in time thanks to some glitch. We've seen an episode of The Simpsons that first aired in 1991 get interrupted by a cough medicine commercial from 2000, and a television broadcast from 2015 can be heard in the video Pitfalls all the way back in 1990, a full 25 years before. In our previous theory trying to make sense of the timeline here, we believed that there was some sort of infinite time loop going on, with a previous version of the real world falling into and being consumed by the Backrooms, before a new one was created and started the cycle anew. This, in turn, was letting these different pieces from different times all show up together. But now, considering that Ravi was able to directly interact interact with that dad something directly outside of his time? I believe that it's less of a time loop and more just the world of the Backrooms glitching so much that different times and places on the same timeline are folding into themselves, which in and of itself is a little more terrifying. And this also still lines up with our previous theories of how and why Async became interested in exploring the Backrooms, since I'm still pretty sure that the camera in Found Footage 2 from the mid-90s wound up in the hands of Async in the 1970s. You know, thanks to that same green glow found in multiple videos. Speaking of that mysterious green glow, you might have missed it, but it also shows up again here in Found Footage 3. Yeah, when Ravi is trying to reach out and find contact over the radio, in a blink and you miss it moment, you can see a green light shine on the ceiling, identical to what we've seen throughout the rest of the series. And after Overflow, this is now the second time where we've seen a green light associated with radios, and I think I know why. In a previous theory, we were able to connect both the device that Async used to first open the Backrooms and no-clipping itself to electromagnetic waves, and wouldn't you know it, but radio waves are a type of electromagnetic wave. So, if we're still working under the idea that electromagnetism can help you no-clip in or out of the Backrooms, it would make sense that radios would do the same. And the fact that they're the longest EM wave, maybe that's helping the weird timey-wimey nonsense happen in the series. But let's back up and talk about this radio tower for a second, cause this thing is weird, right? It looks like just a bunch of random audio equipment from all sorts of different eras got smushed together right here with no rhyme or reason. You have a pretty modern looking synth keyboard, an ancient looking radio, what looks like a cutting edge radio from the 80s or 90s, it's sort of a hodgepodge. But why is it all here? Did someone in the Backrooms manage to find all of this and put it together in an attempt to send a message out? Well, no, I don't think so. This is a lot of stuff. It doesn't have the slick presentation of something Async would build, and I think some rando going undetected by the Backrooms monsters long enough to build this is a bit of a stretch. No, instead, I think this is something that the Backrooms sort of cobbled together itself. If we're still working under the assumption that the Backrooms are glitchy leftover assets from building a simulation, perhaps places like this tower are just the Backrooms putting stuff it thinks is related all together. Like, imagine if all of this audio equipment had the word radio or audio in a tag or in its file name. Whatever is running the Backrooms likely saw that and generated it all here together, despite it not making a ton of logical sense to our human brains. In fact, I think that a computer system sort of gathering anything and everything it thinks is relevant together, despite how weird and nonsensical it would seem to a human, could explain a lot of the strange things in this video. For example, why is there a bunch of imagery related to China, ranging from a portrait of Chairman Mao to a poster for a health checkup in California, all put together? There's even a statue of Kuan Yin, the Chinese goddess of compassion, in here, seemingly unrelated to anything else. Shoutouts to Reddit user SharpCandle5429, they were the earliest person I saw identify this. Well, again, this could be the Backrooms pulling in anything it sees labeled as China together, regardless of whether or not it's actually related. Same thing with the caveman cutout, the weird speaker system, and the sun paintings in the radio room, or even the Kuan Yin statue again. All of that looks like it could be art or parts of an exhibit at a museum like the Tate Modern or the Natural History Museum, labeled or categorized under museum by the system. Believe it or not, that could even fit with the monster we see in here. Yeah, this monster that chases Ravi through the area. When asked for a name for this creature, Kane called it the still life, which the community then ran with. Well, what is a still life? It's a type of artwork, a painting of inanimate objects. And isn't it interesting that a monster named after art is in a part of the Backrooms where there's a lot of museum stuff gathered into one place? Oh, and just the little cherry on top here, but Kane named one of the music tracks he composed for this video Still Life, another piece of art related to this Backrooms video. Also, shoutouts to Kane for being multi-talented. The music he makes for this series is like legitimately great. Speaking of the still life, let's actually touch on that, shall we? Yeah, there's a new monster in this video that seems a lot different from the lifeform fellow. It's more humanoid with traditional human proportions, and at the very least, it looks, acts, and sounds a lot like a traditional zombie. Now, I should be clear, I am certain that this is not a zombie. Kane was asked on his Discord server if it was, and though he said it's not impossible, it's hard to tell, but I'd assume no. And I tend to agree with him here. Kane has previously expressed frustration with zombie-related media, and that there was no traditional zombie infection situation happening in his Backroom series. So why take his pretty unique take on things and shove zombies into it? No, this is something else, something new. And whether or not it's an infected person or zombie, I think matters a whole lot less than the fact that it looks like a person at all. all. This thing really does just look humanoid, and I believe that's for a distinct purpose. It's the Backrooms trying to mimic people. Think about this. All throughout the Backrooms series, we've seen just how the Backrooms has tried to recreate aspects of the real world. It started out with basic empty offices with yellow wallpaper, and it's since evolved into full-blown neighborhoods and even cityscapes, all of which just aren't quite right. Hallways are too thin, offices empty, signs backwards, and the sky red. This could also explain why we see a near copy of a house from the secret video Home 27647.mov in found footage 2. The Backrooms made a near perfect copy of this home, but just off. We actually see direct evidence of this in found footage 3 itself too. There's a particular moment where Ravi comes across the play place rug that everyone seemed to have growing up, just hanging out here in the Backrooms. We actually have one of these in our office here at Theorist, so that was a nice little surprise for me. That's fun. Well, slightly later in the video, Ravi comes across a strange room with small buildings, green turf, and a slide in it. I saw this and thought, wait, that looks a bit familiar. The playmat also has green turf, very rudimentary looking buildings, and what looks like a slide or a track. It also has very bright primary colors like red, blue, and yellow, which you can see on the slide in this room. It looks like the AI that runs the Backrooms basically ingested this map from this rug and tried to turn it into something real here, but just not quite getting it right. Just like it's done with other offices, neighborhoods, cities, and now humans. The Backrooms have evolved past just recreating places and inanimate objects and is now trying to replicate humans, but it just can't get it right. This isn't a real living person, it's just a still life. Thematically, this whole episode has been about slipping in and out of the walls of the Backrooms, yes, but also of reality. Ravi finds a place where the walls are thin enough to actually talk to someone outside of the Backrooms. The dad tries to break through the wall and is basically punished for it. The whole video starts because something broke a big hole between the real world and the Backrooms. And this is perhaps best symbolized by this strange scene of something crawling out from underneath a gap in a wall. It's a bit tough to tell what this actually is. At first I thought it was something similar to the Lifeform fellow monster, but I've also seen speculation online that it's a bug like a cockroach. Either way, the fact that it's moving out from underneath this wall, it's symbolic. The walls, the barriers between what's real and what isn't are becoming thinner and thinner, and it's having an observable effect on the real world. Things are moving in and out of the Backrooms more and more, and in increasingly weird and different ways. When Ravi is talking to that dad, the dad asks him,
I don't want to be the guy who keeps going around here trying to talk to my boys.
Someone else has been talking to this guy's kids, almost certainly through the Backrooms. We even see bloody footprints in this part of the facility, probably left by the last person that came through here and tried to talk to this family to get help. This isn't the first disembodied voice that this family has heard through their walls, and it probably isn't the first person who communicated with someone outside of the Backrooms. To someone who didn't know any better, it might feel like they're just straight up talking to a ghost, and well, what if that is what's happening? Or rather, whether someone who has had a paranormal experience like hearing a disembodied voice or seeing someone walk through a wall or someone out of time, what if that was some shenanigans caused by the Backrooms? What if it was someone no-clipping in, or someone who was trapped, or someone out of their own time period? That adds just another great layer of potential horror to this world, and I love it so much. But what's even more terrifying, it's not just things going into the Backrooms. Something from inside the Backrooms has almost certainly gotten out. At the beginning of the video, Ravi hears a noise downstairs in his house, and when he investigates, he finds that his sliding glass door has been shattered by something. This in turn leads him to discover the large hole punched in the wall of his basement. Clearly something busted through the walls here and made its way outside. Something originally from the Backrooms, like the Lifeform fellow or the Still Life, or something even worse that we haven't met yet. And we might even see it in this video. As Ravi looks for the intruder in his closet, we see a strange chair in the corner. First off, who keeps a chair in their closet? That's already weird and very in line with the Backrooms, right? This whole series has used weird chairs in weird places to show how the Backrooms just don't quite get how real-world furniture works. If monsters like the Lifeform fellow can transform, perhaps this one is taking the form of a chair to hide, not realizing that it's a bit weird that it would be in a closet. But on top of that, it's fuzzy and black, almost as if the camera is having a difficult time even picking it up. And just listen to what happens when Ravi points the camera directly at it and then 180 degrees away from the chair.
someone there?
There's very clearly some sort of strange buzzing sound going on when the camera's pointed directly at or away from this thing. If there's strange electromagnetism going on inside the backrooms like we've speculated, well, could a backrooms monster give off that same sort of radiation and interfere with electronics like a camera? Regardless, it's safe to say that things have started to escalate here. This is no longer a case of just people falling into the backrooms, going missing, and dying in this giant endless office space. No, what's inside is now getting out. The computer system, the AI running the backrooms, is starting to leak into reality, and now we're all in danger because of it. Finally, the Backrooms are back. Yeah, the viral analog horror YouTube series created by Kane Pixels, based on the online meme about being trapped in endless, fluorescently lit hallways, has finally transformed into a psychological horror film, with its first poster and teaser trailer released online a couple of weeks back. Have to say, I really appreciate this poster. There are no frills. It knows exactly what it is, and I mean, come on, you know I bought one. Can't wait to get this framed and hung up right next to the Film Theory 10th anniversary poster, available over at Theoryverse.store. Anyway, we've been covering the Backrooms for years at this point. It's actually one of my favorite series that we've ever talked about. In case you need a refresher, because it has been a minute, the Backrooms is all about a mysterious world that seems to be layered on top of, or beneath, ours. There are endless hallways, and it seems like anyone can no-clip or disappear into the Backrooms at any point from anywhere. An organization known as Naessig has taken a keen interest in the Backrooms, hoping to make money off of it because, you gotta love capitalism, but there are terrible monsters lurking within it that they may have set free into the real world. Our running theory has been that the Backrooms are a sort of video game simulation full of all of the cut or unused content for the real world. And now, the movie seems like it's gonna be giving us some real answers about what is really going on here in the Backrooms. Yeah, despite being short and only featuring like some voiceover and different versions of one room, that dialogue tells us a lot about where this story is going. It was simple but effective, and there's just so much to say about it. Though it does seem like Kane has a few words about our previous theories back from when he was interviewed by Smosh alike.
If I can be completely blunt, the film theory interpretation is fairly off.
Oh. Well, The Backrooms is a viral analog YouTube series created by Kane Pixels based on the online meme that, no, but for real, it's not often that a creator actually goes out of their way to interact with the theory community like this. And if our running theory about the Backrooms isn't the direction Kane's headed in, that excites me so much. We get to take another look at this world and try to think about it in a new angle, and that's something that we don't get to do that often. I actually have some pretty big plans about revisiting these old videos before the movie because of this, but we'll get to that someday, don't you worry. But for now, today, I want to break down this teaser and just how much it tells us about both the plot of this movie and the wider Backrooms lore. Is it crazy that I pulled almost 6 pages of a script out of 1 minute of a teaser? Maybe, but it not only tells us who the main characters of this story are going to be, but may have just cracked exactly what the Backrooms are wide open. So get your hazmat suits ready once again, loyal theorists. We're no-clipping in. So first things first, let's actually break down the teaser, shall we? The trailer starts with a shot of what looks like an abandoned room. There's a chair in the corner, a bookshelf, some trash on the floor, that sort of thing. Most importantly though, we are likely in the quote-unquote real world. We see windows leading outside with natural sunlight streaming through them, so more or less, this looks like just somebody's room in a house or apartment or something like that. But before we can really get settled, well, the camera starts to dip down into the floor, almost like we're no-clipping downward, right? As we move, we reveal the same room again. This one also appears to be in the real world again because of the sunlight kind of coming in through the window, but there is some weird chromatic aberration at the edge of the light coming in here, so that might signify that it's actually some like weird artificial light. It's hard to tell right now. The same chair and bookshelf are here, but otherwise the room is empty. Everything else is gone. The camera then goes into the floor again, no clipping through and revealing yet another version of this same room. But this one is wrong. It's off. The windows are covered by what appears to just be the wall, and the chair has sunken into the floor. The bookshelf has been duplicated, stacked on top of each other, and it's clipping into the wall itself. We clip through the floor again, and the new version of the room is even more off. The windows have sunken on the wall. The bookshelf is basically gone, and the chair, well, there are 2 of them, and they're much skinnier and pushed against the wall. One of them is like in the wall. We clip through the floor again, and now there's nothing in the room. nothing, just yellow walls and a light. Even the doors to the room are gone. Next room, and it's also empty, but, well, it looks like there's an outline for another floor plan peeking up through the floor? It's very strange. The room has also been simplified. There's no little hallway in the back leading to another room. Through the floor again, and yet again the room has been simplified, but now there's like a strange, small passageway, like little hallway leading into the darkness. Down again, and the passageway has grown and basically covers this entire corner. We then go down one final time and we find ourselves in the classic look of the backrooms. Fluorescent lights, walls and hallways that make no sense, moist yellow carpets. You get the idea. Cue title, cut to black. Now that imagery is weird, and over top all of this, we hear a conversation. Firstly, we hear someone say,
I found something.
This is the voice of Chiwetel Ejiofor, a fantastic actor that you'll recognize as, oh, it's that guy from Doctor Strange, The Martian, and The Lion King. And just real quick, how insane is it that Kane got this guy for his first movie? Anyway, he's having a conversation with a woman who asks,
Did you find?
This character is played by Renata Reinsva, who is the other lead in the movie. Ejiofor's character then explains,
Found a place. It's massive in there. It just goes on and on and on. All these rooms. This place builds them. Actually, more like it remembers them. And the more times it remembers something, the less it does.
Now, on the face of things, it might not seem like we get a ton of information out of this teaser, but if you break down what is actually said here, what we know about the movie from outside of the teaser, and how it recontextualizes a lot of previous information we had from the web series, we can learn a lot. Firstly, can we figure out who these characters actually are? Well, the official synopsis for the movie reads, a psychologist is forced to confront a terrifying, unexplained realm after one of her patients vanishes into a mysterious alternate dimension. Based on the conversation we hear in the teaser, well, it sounds like Ejiofor is going to be that patient and Reinsva is going to be the therapist listening to him. I'm gonna bet that she thinks he's a bit cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs at first before realizing that he really did find a way into the backrooms and will venture in to try to rescue him from whatever threat is in there. But something else that's significant here, well, it isn't what is mentioned, but rather what isn't mentioned. And that would be Async, the organization that allegedly discovered the backrooms first and is trying to take advantage of it in the web series. Now, to be clear, that doesn't mean that Async won't be in the movie. I'd actually be surprised if they weren't. It's entirely possible that Ejiofor's character is an employee there, or heck, maybe even Reinsva could be a therapist employed by Async. But it's notable that they're nowhere here in the marketing yet, considering that the yellow jumpsuits are such a huge part of Kane's backroom lore and iconography. And if Kane wanted to go in the direction of not including Async in this movie, or just have them be a small part of the story, that could go a long way in actually expanding out the universe that he set up here. I mean, that original viral video basically didn't have really anything to do with Async. So if Ejiofor was just some guy who independently finds a portal into the backrooms, or he makes one himself, or he's part of another organization, that could set up a lot of conflict later down the road if the film is successful enough and they want to do more of them. That separation would also let people going into this world who have no idea about the web series still follow the story and not feel like they have to go watch all of that content and then explainers and theories to get the full picture. Man, look at me here just sitting, plotting out the whole Backrooms cinematic universe from one line in a movie synopsis. Either way, at least from this trailer, we can definitively say that Async isn't involved in this story yet. But something else that stuck out to me in the teaser was this line.
And the more times it remembers something, the less it does.
This tickled my theorist brain for a few reasons. At this point, you've probably heard that eyewitness testimony is notoriously unreliable, so much so that nationally, 69% nice of exonerations in the United States involve eyewitness misidentification. Similarly, this line also reminded me of a study I came across while perusing the sciencey side of the internet. What, you guys don't read science papers for fun? It's good dinner conversation. Anyway, according to a study from Northwestern University, memory is, well, it's weird. The first time you remember something, it's very clear and likely fairly accurate. Have you ever had an intense flashback to something from your childhood that you hadn't thought about in years and years, and you could remember every exact detail? Well, that's why. However, the next time you remember that same thing, you're not remembering the original memory. You're remembering the last time you remembered it. You're recalling the version of events that was in your brain the last time you thought thought about it. Now, if that event just happened, well, it's still probably going to be fairly accurate, and remembering it over and over will help solidify what happened in your brain. It'll make that memory stronger. But if it's an old memory, every time you think about it, it's going to be slightly different than the last, and then slightly different the next time, and then again, and again, and again, until what you're remembering kind of looks like what actually happened. The broad strokes are probably correct, but the fine details are going to be frayed at the edges. You might remember having an important conversation with someone, but start losing the number of shelves on the bookshelf in the room, or what exactly the chair in the corner looked like, or exactly how the light was streaming in through the windows. Similar to what we see in this Backrooms teaser. And really, this kind of plays into the original idea of the Backrooms, right? The meme, I mean, not necessarily Kane's series about it. The reason so many people thought the first Backrooms picture and caption were so creepy is because they felt like they'd been there before. It felt so familiar and yet so different, so uncanny, like some distorted recreation of something that actually happened. That's true for all liminal spaces in online horror. It's the place in between places that you feel like you've seen before, but are slightly different than what you recall. It's just off enough to not be exactly what's from your life, but close enough to be recognizable. There are moments lost to your past, warped by time and distance. And while we're on the subject of memory, it should also be noted that organizations within the United States have taken huge interest in remembering and memory before, particularly as part of a program called MKUltra. If you don't know, MKUltra was a program undertaken by the CIA between the 1950s and 1970s with hopes of creating procedures or finding drugs that could change how humans behaved. They did a lot of terrible things and looked into a lot of horrible ideas, including something called the Perfect Concussion Program. This hoped to use sound blasts to erase memories and targets, but thankfully, this was never carried out. But elsewhere, they performed the Montreal experiments, which hoped to treat schizophrenia. How? Well, by changing the memories and erasing thoughts using everything from drugs, electroconvulsive therapy, sensory deprivation, and even torture. It was brutal, and it didn't even really work. But it is worth noting here because organizations like Async here in the Backrooms would take a keen interest in memory alteration, especially if the Backrooms was remembering things, right? There may be some inspiration pulled from this just terrible part of history in the film, especially if one of the main characters is a therapist and we're exploring the psychological part of the Backrooms horror. But even more interesting and maybe relevant for us today, well, there may be a link between memory loss and another huge part of the Backrooms lore, bacteria. Yeah, you know how there's a recurring monster within Kane's Backrooms that's sort of like a bacteria life form fellow skulking around the halls and causing the deaths of several characters? Well, according to scientific research, bacteria may be linked to mental decline and memory loss. Yeah, this research team looked through 58 human studies from all around the world and found a weird connection between the gut, the immune system, and the brain. See, people who were healthy, people who had mild cognitive impairment, and people with Alzheimer's disease, the most common form of dementia, all three had different amounts and different types of bacteria in their gut. That would basically suggest that those different types of bacteria are somehow linked to that mental decline. Now, this particular research is incredibly new. It's just from January of this year. So unless Kane just has a massive brain or can see the future, he didn't have this in mind when he was developing the lore for his version of the Backrooms. But the fact that this story is moving into the idea of memories, misremembering, and that bacteria have been such an integral part of this story, this is absolutely a direction that this narrative could head in. If the Backrooms is somehow alive and is creating these rooms and hallways and complexes based on its memory, well, this bacteria lifeform fellow could very well be the root of all the areas and neighborhoods that just feel wrong. The Backrooms basically has dementia, which would then suggest that it's sort of alive, right? And believe it or not, but that does line up with a lot of ideas that are kind of out there. So there are a lot of different theories. Some might even say that there are conspiracies about how the universe works and whether or not it's alive. Some people believe that it's way more likely that we're living in a simulated reality with implanted memories and historical events than it is that we're living in a real world where all of those things actually happened, similar to the Matrix. We actually cover that in depth in our previous Backroom videos, though Kane has fully debunked that version of this universe. Another idea is that because because we're part of the universe and are experiencing it, therefore at least part of the universe itself is alive. The universe is a living organism and we are like cells within its bodies or thoughts within its mind. It's high concept, but that's really sweet and I kinda dig it. But another theory connected to this entire idea and why I wanted to talk about this is known as the Boltzmann brain. The Boltzmann brain thought experiment is the work of Austrian mathematician and theoretical physicist Ludwig Boltzmann. He suggested that it's way more likely for a brain to just pop into existence in the void of space with all of the memories of the universe as we know it than it is for the entire universe to have begun and gone on for billions of years like most cosmologists believe that it did. How and why? Well, if you give it enough time, random fluctuations in matter could cause particles to just spontaneously appear, and they could be structured like literally anything. They could randomly come into existence as the Brooklyn Bridge, or a copy of Halo 3, or a bottle of Gamer Sups. Use code FILMTheory for 10% off your order. Now, this could apply to the Backrooms in a number of ways. The entire world of the Backrooms could literally just be something invented by one of these Boltzmann brains, implanted memories in a mind that just spontaneously came into being. Or, what's maybe more likely, these rooms are being spontaneously created by fluctuations in the particles of the universe. Like, if Kane really wanted to, things could get really weird and really out there for the Backrooms lore with a reveal like that. And honestly, this idea of warped memories also recontextualizes a lot of the web series, particularly the video I Remember. If you don't, well, remember, this was a strange video in the series. It wasn't explicitly set anywhere in the timeline, and it was more of an artistic, stylized piece than any of the other found footage videos. Yeah, there was no poor async employee or unfortunate rando wandering around in this one. It just featured trippy imagery while a voice read poetry over it. That voice describes a house that it once had, overlooking the sea. But one day, the house collapsed into the ocean, settling in the seabed to be forgotten with all of the silt and the seashells. But the person speaking remembers it. It remembers the house at the bottom of the ocean. What if this is the voice of the Backrooms? Whatever entity that is remembering these rooms and these landscapes. Sad that the house that it used to have, some old universe or memories of a time gone by, are starting to warp. Those old memories have fallen into the sea, so to speak. And the more and more it tries to remember that house, the more and more it remembers it wrong. I, for one, cannot wait to find out where this is headed when this movie hits theaters, man. So at this point, you probably know what the Backrooms is. There's a mysterious alternate dimension or something full of yellow hallways and bacteria monsters that people seem to keep slipping into, or no-clipping into, from the real world. And if you find yourself in there, you're probably never getting out. And what started out as a creepypasta meme eventually became a top-tier YouTube horror web series, which itself has now become a feature film about to release in just a month and a half. Man, between this and Iron Lung, we fans of YouTube are just eating good this year. It's only been a few weeks since we got the first teaser trailer for the Backrooms movie from Kane Pixels and A24, but we already have another trailer. This one's showing us way more about the movie. Yeah, we get character names, our first real look at what a big budget live action Backrooms is gonna look like, found footage that looks like the web series, and hold the phone, we got a hazmat suit, guys. Let me tell you, I've been a huge fan of the world that Kane crafted here for years. I worked as an editor on our very first Backrooms video we did here on Film Theory, and I felt like we've had such a drought of content while Kane was off actually making this movie, and man, analog horror is really just in a renaissance, let me tell you what. I have a lot of plans about revisiting the Backrooms with a big project, hopefully before the movie releases, but with all of this new info packed into this trailer, you just know I basically had to drop everything and cover it. And let me just say, based on what we see here, it looks like my previous theory about the Backrooms being some sort of strange entity suffering from mental decline might have way more merit than even I thought at first glance. So no need to keep dragging this one out, loyal theorists. Tape a border around the portal in the wall, we're no-clipping right on in. The trailer starts with a shot of the outside of a furniture store called Captain Clark's Ottoman Empire. First of all, I love the puntastic name, and we already have a ton more information about the movie. Like, based on another clip in the trailer where another character says Clark, I'm almost positive that Chiwetel Ejiofor's character is going to be named Clark and that he's clearly the owner of this furniture store. Secondly, all of the cars here are very old school 80s or 90s coded designs. And we also see a bunch of costumes for the movie that give off that same time frame. frame. Given that most of the Backrooms takes place during that time frame, it makes sense that the movie would too. And in fact, we have another shot later in the trailer that confirms this by giving us the date, June 29th, 1990. If you're keeping track of the Backrooms timeline, and if you're not, keep an eye out because I want to do a video about that soon, that puts us right after the end of Static Dead End, which takes place on May 29th, 1990, according to the description. Also, just from the first few frames of this trailer, we also have an Easter egg to talk about. Take a listen to the music that's playing in the background here. That's a version of the song 647 by Instupendo, a song commonly associated with analog horror, liminal spaces, and the Backrooms in viral edits and memes online. Man, everything about this film just seems really in tune with the audience, and you'll love to see it. Kane did great work here, man. Anyway, we pull into the store where we see a bunch of the furniture on sale, and a bunch of signs saying that the entire store is on sale, with some things up to 75% off and no credit needed. So either Clark here is being very generous, or the store isn't doing too hot and he's just trying to sell, well, anything really. Futurely here, but after I wrote and recorded this, A24 released a viral ad for Cap'n Clark's that just has this actor going ham.
Price is so low, you'll think that you're robbing me!
There's actually a number here that's a fax number, which leads you to this PDF. It's an ad for the store, and it actually tells us where this takes place. It's a strip mall in San Jose, California, and actually looks identical to the location in the film, obviously without the store from the 90s in there. I love this so much. Anyway, back to the video. The further we get into the store, we see Clark looking very confused at, well, like a small slit in the wall. Yeah, there's a tiny beam of light coming through the wall of his store before it slowly vanishes. Clark walks up to the wall, putting his hand and ear up against it before he falls into the Backrooms. Yeah, we see Clark standing up in the Backrooms, and can I just say, it looks so strange to see a high-quality cinematic shot in the Backrooms when so much of it has been grainy, VHS quality found footage. Regardless, Clark stands up and sees a weird pile of furniture in the middle of the store, related, I assume, to the fact that this portal into the Backrooms is located in a furniture store. And it's here where I also want to point out that putting that portal in a furniture store here in the film was inspired for a couple of reasons. Firstly, the original Backrooms image that started off this entire thing, that inspired Kane to make this series, is actually a photo from a furniture store in Wisconsin. The origin of that original photo was only discovered in 2024, most likely long after Kane would have been working on this script with writer Will Sudik, but it's a fun coincidence anyway. And secondly, one of the more famous entries in the SCP Wiki is known as the Infinite IKEA. Obviously, the Backrooms and the SCP Foundation are not necessarily connected, but this particular SCP was very similar to the Backrooms concept. So a portal to an infinite dimension of rooms in the basement of a furniture store like IKEA? Man, I love to see it. Next, Clark walks around a bit before looking down a long hallway, only to see the silhouette of a person. Not gonna lie, I kinda jumped here. Is that a monster? Someone else trapped down here in the Backrooms? Well, neither, actually. If you notice, it doesn't move. It almost looks like it's a cardboard cutout of a person, right? And that's because it is. This is actually the same cardboard cutout of a caveman we see in the Found Footage 3 video. This is clearly not in the same location as that video, which means one of three things. Either the cutout was moved in between those videos, there's more than one basically identical cutout here in the Backrooms, not impossible given just how many copies of, well, everything there is down here, or the cardboard cutout is actually alive and moved on its own. That last one doesn't seem super likely to me personally. I'd probably go with the idea that there are multiple cutouts. We also hear some strange voices here in the background. But we will get back to that, I promise. For now, over top all of this, we've also been getting a voiceover from Clark, similar to what we heard in the first teaser.
I found something in the store.
After a few more shots of Clark wandering around, seeing the strange and weird geometry of the Backrooms, and coming across out-of-place objects like a stop sign, we see and hear the woman played by Renata Reinsova say,
I'm not saying I don't believe you.
The two are in an office setting with what looks like diplomas on the wall. It looks like our speculation that Reinsova is playing Clark's therapist in the last video was correct. Oh, and we also get Reinsova's character name in a brief blink and you miss it moment. Yeah, right after this, for For one frame in the VHS static, you can see what looks like an old advertisement for a self-help book called The Window Within with Reinceva's face on it, written by Dr. Mary Klein. So there you go, we have our main character names now, Clark and Mary. Oh, and a couple more thoughts about this book. Firstly, I adore that they're using classic analog horror techniques even in this big budget film. Like, I did not have going frame by frame looking for lore on my bingo card for the trailers for this movie, but I'm happy to be wrong. Secondly, the name of this book, The Window Within, and talking about breaking through the pane of glass is how I assume that's going to end, is also very thematic and on brand for the Backrooms, right? Especially if our current thought process about the Backrooms being some sort of strange misremembering of the world by an entity is right. We are looking through the window into the world within their broken mind. Or maybe that's just me being overly poetic. Given how much thought Kane's put into this series though, I'm thinking not. Back in Mary's office, let's re-examine the conversation that these two are having. Clark is trying to convince Mary that he's discovered the Backrooms, this strange alternate dimension that goes on and on and on. And obviously, that sounds a bit out there. And Clark understands that.
Look, I know how this sounds, but you gotta understand, it's massive in there.
Thus, Mary's skepticism.
I'm not saying I don't believe you.
Okay.
Clearly, the dynamic that they're setting up here is one where Clark is trying to convince people of this wild, impossible thing that he's actually found. And it's here where I have to say that Clark also does two things very intelligently. Like, wow, a horror film character that actually puts some thought into things? Wild. So, one, we see that he's made a little map of the Backrooms, sketching out the layout so he doesn't get lost as easily in there. I tried to see if there was a connection to previous locations we visited in the web series, and while there might be some references here or there, like that room with all the plush-shaped pillars, nothing really seems to line up one-to-one. But secondly, Clark says,
I'm gonna come back here with proof.
So he is going in to actually prove that something's there, instead of just ranting and raving about it so people don't believe him. Clark is a smart cookie. We then cut to shots of a VHS camcorder? Yeah, this is the proof that Clark is going to get. He recruited two of his friends, a camcorder, and a bunch of gear, and they're gonna go film an adventure in the Backrooms. Honestly, this is a really clever way to get some of that found footage vibe from the original web series back into this film without making the whole project found footage. Also probably helped save a bit on the budget, so, you know, that was smart. Anyway, we see several shots of this impromptu expedition into the Backrooms. Hey, Future Lee here again, popping in to say that I just noticed that this is the stop sign from earlier in the trailer. Yeah, you know, the one that's like in the Backrooms and like oddly flipped? That means Clark and his friends have taken stuff out of the Backrooms, which I think might be one of the first cases of that happening. Like Async might have done it at some point, but just something that jumped out at me while I was giving notes here on the edit and I wanted to add in. Anyway, back to the video. More weird rooms, piles of furniture, and a room with statues or mannequins that have been sunken into the floor. There's also a Christmas tree here, which might be a reference to level 941 of the Backrooms wiki. To be clear, that is a separate canon that's not directly connected to Kane's version of the Backrooms at all, but it's said to look like a home decorated for Christmas time. It's fun if this is indeed meant to be a little tip of the hat, but it could go either way. Clark then explains that
I've been there every night since I found the place and I still barely scratched the surface.
So understandably, he's gotten a little obsessed. As we hear this, we see Clark and one of his friends tie another friend to a rope so they can rappel down a hole. Camera then glitches and we see a disturbing scene. A much dirtier area with what I think are piles of clothes at the bottom of a big chasm. There's also a lot of gross black gunk on the walls here, which, well, if you've seen the original Backrooms video, you know what that probably is. Given the editing of the trailer, it seems like this is supposed to be whatever's at the bottom of the hole that Clark sent his friend down, since something spooks him and he yells, "Pull me up, pull me up, pull me up!" We also hear what sounds like a monster roar, most likely a lifeform fellow that is chasing this poor guy. We then have a montage of a few scenes. Mary watching television in her home, Clark finding a bag hidden inside of a wall. It's unclear if this is something Clark left behind or something a different survivor hid that Clark is now stumbling upon. There are more odd rooms and found footage style shots, and one of them actually has like wheels that you'd find at the helm of a ship, maybe referencing Captain Clark's store from the beginning of the trailer. There's also a shot of Clark trying to get back through the wall wall and out of the back rooms. I assume that this is from the sequence where he first finds it and is trying to figure out what's happened and get back out. And finally, another VHS found footage clip of someone running in an area that's an exact recreation of the original Backrooms image. First of all, love the little Easter egg, and secondly, this is actually the second time that Kane has done something like this. In found footage 3, the POV character briefly looks at a wall that is identical to that original image. At first, I wondered if this was like literally the same area and they were connecting the web series and the film. But at closer inspection, they're similar but different. There's no chair or like mini bar / wall in the film, but it's still neat and I love that they did this. Clark also finds a camera linked to something behind a sealed door, and we also get a shot from the camera's point of view in what looks like a control room of some sort. Where is this? Well, if I had to guess, it's Async headquarters. Yeah, right after this, we also get a shot of 3 hazmat guys in the Backrooms. Async's back on the menu, boys! It's unclear how much they're gonna be involved with this story, but it's so cool that they're actually in the movie, especially since it seems like Clark and Mary don't have any connection to them. We get to expand this world without completely leaving this huge part of Kane's lore behind. Now, what's actually happening in this shot is also interesting. There seems to be an alarm blaring. One of the hazmat guys is stumbling backwards and is caught by another one who's also wearing green for some reason. No idea what that could signify. Like, maybe it's a different rank or department of Async, or maybe it's a copy of a person from the Backrooms. Probably not, but hey, it was cool to think about. A third guy also runs in from the back, as the first dude is holding some sort of pressurized container. To me, this looks like they just got jump scared by something. Maybe a lifeform fellow? Or maybe Clark. That'd be kind of funny, not gonna lie. Also, before we leave this shot, you notice that weird mural behind the Async employees? It has like a beachfront on it, but it's also weirdly stretched and just feels wrong. Well, that's not the only place we see this image in the teaser. In this shot, we see that same mural in the background of Captain Clark's, but correctly sized. So it appears like that's hard confirmation that a lot of what we're seeing in the Backrooms is what's actually in the real world, but just misremembered in some way. It's exactly what was described in the teaser and is lining up with what we were thinking in our previous theory. Next, Mary sits in bed before going to the furniture store looking for Clark, and finding where Clark and his friends have marked the entrance to the Backrooms with tape. I like a lot of the details here in the shot. You can see a whiteboard where they've mapped out part of the Backrooms area, and the table and mirror that we see earlier in the trailer as Clark and his friends plan their little expedition. Anyway, Mary tentatively touches the wall and then walks through it into the Backrooms. Over top of this, we also hear Clark say,
"It's beautiful, am I right?"
Not gonna lie, this sounds ominous. Like Clark has somehow lost his mind in these hallways. The trailer then leans hard into the horror idea, showing just how alone Mary is in the Backrooms. That caveman cutout is gone in the shot of the long hallway, so maybe it does move, or was just taken somewhere. And we then see a very claustrophobic shot of Mary running inside of a thin hallway covered in grime and blood, looking terrified. She's either encountered one of the Lifeform fellows, or Async, or maybe Clark has gone insane and attacked her and she's trying to escape. Either way, this hallway shot is awesome and very effective, and just, man, I'm so looking forward to this. This is probably my favorite image from the trailer. We then cut to black and cue title card. Okay, so there's just so much going on here, man. I mean, we talked for 5 pages about this and I have even more. In fact, I have 2 giant points that we just have to talk about. First off, well, let's go back to those strange voices we hear early in the trailer, shall we? Yeah, remember when Clark first enters the Backrooms and we hear this? Clearly, things are being said in a foreign language, or maybe multiple foreign languages. And as I was searching for what they were actually saying, I realized that this was actually something very familiar to me. How? Well, this is a recording from one of the famous Voyager Golden Records. Stick with me, this is very relevant. If you don't know, the Voyager space program was a project NASA underwent in the 1970s where they launched 2 spacecraft, Voyager 1 and Voyager 2, into deep space. The probes gathered gathered a lot of information about the planets and bodies in the outer solar system, like Jupiter, Saturn, and more, and then both were sent out of the solar system itself. That was always the plan. They were probes sent away from the sun, and on the off chance that someday, in billions of years, that they'd be discovered by intelligent life, NASA included a golden record on both that had a ton of information on them. This included a bunch of math to prove our intelligence, a map back to the solar system, physical aspects of the human body, photographs of life on Earth, and audio recordings of various sounds from Earth, wildlife, music, brainwaves, that sort of thing. It was a beautiful project, in my opinion. I love the idea of the golden record. I actually have a replica of it in my home, and I want to get the map tattooed on my arm someday. But most importantly for us, and why we're talking about it now, well, some of the other audio recordings included on the record was a compilation of various greetings from around the world, recorded in dozens of different languages. That is what we're hearing here. Specifically, you can hear it really well in the Urdu recording. Here, check it out. This is a phrase translating to, "Peace on you. We, the inhabitants of this earth, send our greetings to you." And that just has so many implications. Are the Backrooms some sort of alien construct built after they discovered the Voyager probe and tracked it back to Earth? Or are the Backrooms somehow remembering the messages from these probes but wrong and distorted? I mean, golden record and yellow wallpaper? That's kind of interesting. Or is this just cool, creepy audio that they included as a deep cut that doesn't have any major bearing on the plot? Maybe, but that's the least fun option. We've also talked in detail in past theories about how the Backrooms seem to be messing with time, and, well, space and time are connected. Perhaps the Backrooms can mess with space too. Anyway, that's not the only thing I wanted to talk about from this trailer. The second thing actually comes from this scene, where Mary is approaching the portal where it's been marked by tape on the wall. Just on the face of things, this is a fun shot because it feels so, I'm not sure how to describe it, like raw? Like someone is really trying to problem solve in this situation. But while myself and all of the team were talking about this trailer, one of our thumbnail artists pointed out that this looks very similar to another piece of art. And it's one that absolutely adds a mountain of evidence to my previous theory about the Backrooms and its memory failing. See, the tape on the wall here looks a lot like this piece of art, doesn't it? Well, this is the cover of Volume 6 of the musical art piece known as Everywhere at the End of Time by The Caretaker. And you might be thinking, hey, that's kinda random, and I mean fair, it sort of is. But just listen to this. Everywhere at the End of Time is a musical project released between 2016 and 2019 that was meant to represent the mind of a character called the patient in a mental hospital. It cycles through their life events using old ballroom music to represent joy and anxiety, horror and despair. And the further it goes on, the more degraded the music becomes. These albums are supposed to represent the mind of someone living with and suffering from dementia, someone losing all of their memories and cognitive functions. And this 6th volume, with the cover with the tape, it represents the end of that patient's life when they were at the worst of it. I mean, come on, I can't help but see the connection here. This Backrooms movie is talking about how it's remembering these rooms and places wrong, and it's using imagery similar to this famous musical project. Everywhere at the End of Time is highly regarded amongst other artists, and based off of everything I know about Kane, it's exactly the sort of project I think he would really respect. Its symbolism is powerful, and you have to work to understand it, just like his works like The Oldest View, and its themes are connected to where Kane is taking the Backrooms. I don't think I'm looking too deeply into tape on a wall here. This is just more confirmation that the Backrooms themselves are like a universe or entity suffering from dementia, and I cannot wait to see where Kane takes this movie. But hey, that's just a theory. A film theory. And cut!